Good morning. It is Wednesday, April 23rd, and we are here at the Education and Culture Committee and to continue our review of operating budgets. And today we have the great pleasure of having first up, and I invite them to come down, our colleagues from Montgomery College. We're going to go over their operating budget. Then we will deal with Montgomery Coalition for Adult English Literacy, MCAEL, their NDA, and then we will continue and have our second session on the MCPS operating budget. So we've got a lot to do and a lot of great folks. So looking forward to diving in. I will turn it over to Mr. Prouty to cover the topics that we're going to go over, and then to you, Dr. Williams, to start off.
Sure. Thank you, Doug Prouty, Senior Legislative Analyst. So today, from Montgomery College, we'll be looking over the operating budget, looking at revenues, expenditures. There's a number of details there in the packet. There's details in terms of their racial equity and social justice program and how that fits in with the programs of the college. And then the items for discussion today will be enrollment and how that is increasing over time, and the trend continues. A proposal for the Collective Impact Institute at Montgomery College, and there are two letters in the packet about that proposal. We'll talk about the shift in pension costs, which was sent down by the state as part of the final budget package, and finally the budget, so the fund balance for MC and how that is being used, and its history. And then finally, decision and recommendation from the committee about the Montgomery College budget.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Dr. Williams, welcome. Anything you want to say before we jump in?
Yes, please, and thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you very much. Ed, it's always a pleasure to see you. I always have to take an opportunity to thank you, Mr. Prouty, and just share a little bit about our budget. And I know we've discussed, but I'll just dive right in. And the budget is very straightforward and utilizing existing resources, trying to maximize what we have to offer and contribute. So with that said, it is a maintenance of effort budget. That maintenance of effort budget does keep tuition flat, which I think we all know is extremely important in these ever-evolving times, especially some times that have impacted so many displaced federal workers and others in our community. And thirdly, it also provides for fair and reasonable compensation for our faculty and staff, our excellent faculty and staff who make the dreams of our more than 45,000 students come to life at all of our campuses and our East County Education Center. So it is while a maintenance of effort budget, it is an impactful budget that really helps to keep Montgomery College thriving, so that we know that our students can have those experiences of economic, social, and community impact, so they can actually have a role, a profession where they receive a family-sustaining wage and experience individual upward economic and social mobility that portends to intergenerational mobility. And on that note, before I just close, I did want to share just an appreciation for all the considerations and decisions that you have to make. Also wanted to share that we do hope that we'll find a way to be able to account for the pension costs for faculty. You heard Mr. Prouty talk about that cost that is being shifted to the county, and we're seeing that as similar to the pay-as-you-go or the OPEB cost. So it is our hope that the council will be able to find a way to move forward with that, and making that happen, and making us whole. With that, to close, I would just say thank you again. Thank you for helping to keep not only Montgomery College, but Montgomery County thriving. Your community's college has a return on investment of $1.4 billion a year. One of the most, if not the most diverse community colleges in the country. And whether it's from Holy Cross Health or Charles River Laboratories or Henley or anywhere in between. As you heard from the testimonies from our employer partners, Montgomery College continues continues, and we are on the precipice of 80 years, we continue to create the educated and trained workforce that really fuels our economy and our community. So thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, council members, for everything you do and for the opportunity to share a few words today.
Thank you so much. Mr. Prouty, do you want to go through the decision points here? I know it's a pretty, I'll just say at the beginning, we're always happy when it's tuition is flat and it's not a big ask, so thank you. We've got a lot to deal with, but I know the pension shift is something we've dealt with in a multiple contexts, so I know we'll talk about that, but Mr. Prouty, do you want to walk us through here?
So the budget discussion items begin on page 8 of the packet. There's details in terms of enrollment here. There is an expected increase in terms of projected credit hours from 2025. A couple of notes that the committee might want to consider. MC's draw rate in terms of recent MCPS high school graduates is continuing to increase and is returning to the pre-pandemic rate. Credit hours are also growing, and they're growing faster than enrollment. So the credit load per student has increased slightly from fall 2022 to fall 2024. That trend is expected to continue as well. And then MC is projecting enrollment will continue increasing for the next few years by 1 to 2% from FY27 through FY30. So you can anticipate that in terms of out-year budgets. There's some notes in terms of trends of enrollment, and I'll turn it back to you if you want to have some discussion there.
Awesome. Councilmember Albanaz.
Thank you. This sadly is going to be a theme as we go through pretty much all line items, but the impacts on our federal government and the investments being made through the Department of Education, obviously they're of deep concern with the radical adjustments that are happening in real time. But just to hear your thoughts, at least initially, we're all bracing ourselves. We are all somewhat disoriented, but what, if anything, you anticipate within the upcoming year is at risk of potentially losing federal funds?
Yeah. So thank you, Councilmember Albanaz. It is again an ever-evolving situation. I appreciate our the chair and vice president with the budget conversations we had, because we received those questions as well, and it was kind of as of this moment, like this date, this minute. You remember, Vice President, we were like nothing has changed in terms of federal funds, and I will say that is. The same, Councilmember Albanaz, as it applies to grants. I mean, speaking of Pell Grants specifically, and our Pell Grants fuel more than 5,000 students approximately a year and really provide for their lifeline at Montgomery College. When it speaks to other grants, we have done a robust review, and we have had, and we can send some more details, some grants that have been impacted, where we've had to make some serious decisions about what will occur with those grants. But when we talk about the lifeline for our students, which is Pell, Federal Work Study, SEOG, those grants have not been impacted. Those federal funds have not been impacted at this time, and that's where we are right now.
I appreciate that. One follow-up question. So we have a junior in high school who is beginning her journey and looking at the collegiate process. A little overwhelming, I got to say, as a parent, but we're getting through it. But last year, the disruption to FAFSA
Yes.
led to a number of students deferring their decisions on which colleges to move forward with, even if they had been accepted, obviously, because whatever the charge is has a lot to do with what decisions families make on where to go.
Sure.
Montgomery College remains just such a fantastic option for so many different families. But did you see a boost in enrollment potentially as a result of that? And once again, it's in disarray because of all of the confusing information being set forth by the federal government. Is that something that we could anticipate just as we're discussing enrollment moving forward as well?
I think we will, and I appreciate the question. Our students and families were kind of traversing through the same, I was going to say debacle, but I'll say it since I've said it, the same situation that was going on with the free application for federal student aid. What we do think helped with our enrollment are really kind of digging deeper into our Raptor Ready scholarship. We started calling applicants who had been admitted and really asking them if we could help them through the admission process. So we think there have been some adjustments made to our matriculation process that have helped. I do think that we'll see an increase in dual enrollment students. That is something that we are leveraging in partnership with our superintendent and our awesome school district. We want to see more students who are dually enrolled. One of the other pieces, I think there's a lot of conversation based on the position of you as council members and your peers and our state where we live. We may see more students who want to stay in Maryland to pursue post-secondary education as opposed to transitioning to other states. So those are some variables, Councilmember Albanaz, that are just kind of in the atmosphere, and there are others, and can definitely share more details if you like.
Great. No, thank you. That's very helpful.
Councilmember Mink.
Thanks. Along similar lines, and this is something that we have touched on a little bit, but as you've noted, things move quickly. So, with what's happening with the federal workforce, I know that MC is doing a lot to pivot and to serve those who are being impacted. Could you talk a little bit about that and about how that might impact enrollment, perhaps by members of the federal workforce and or by their kids who may have had other plans, just how this transition may impact enrollment?
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember Mink. So when I think about one of the pieces, well, there's several pieces, and I actually can make sure that we send an article to the council members. Was posted in Vice President, you're familiar with Community College Daily, run by ACC, which actually was a fantastic way to uplift all the things that Montgomery College, in concert with council members, with so many other partners, have been doing for our community. One of the pieces I would say, Councilmember Mink, are the strategic job fairs that we've been having. One of them was specifically dedicated to displaced federal workers in the sciences. Right, where we had more than 100 individuals who were there, with hundreds of individuals who we need to and have reached out to additionally, because it was packed. It was at capacity. The reason why is it at capacity? We also complemented that with having several employers there. So there was on-site interviews. We offered headshots, resume review. So those are some of the pieces after those employers provided presentations and talked about what it is that they did and how individuals could help to create the impact that those companies seek. They transitioned to, again, information and interview sessions. We did also pivot our job fairs that were already planned to really have a focus on displaced federal workers. One of the other pieces I'll say is that we've taken a lot of the information that we've created and centralized it onto one site that we've been pushing out, that we have been sharing at events that council members have been having and other events. We've really been focusing on that site. Among other items, it focuses on the free of charge career services that we offer, which help to identify certain careers, help to look at resumes, career coaching. It helps to identify also what we call prior learning assessment, or you might have heard referenced as credit for prior learning. So that is essentially saying, let's look at your work experience and see how your work experience translates to actually college credits, and how that can really kind of elevate, amplify, fast track the attainment of a credential. And the last thing I'll say is the credential piece. We've highlighted how we have kind of shorter term credentials that can lead to immediate employment, while simultaneously being employed and then gaining those kind of longer-term credentials to advance in that profession, whether it is a new profession. So when we think about it, it really is kind of wrapped around this idea of upskilling, reskilling, and what we frame as new skilling. We've often heard that kind of as career changing, but let's just go with the skilling. So upskilling, reskilling, and new skilling. But,
that's great.
Yeah, and I could share any more details that you'd like. I could share more.
I mean, that's great. And we can really see how all of that is applicable, to the federal workforce population that we're talking about, but also to numerous other kind of buckets of high need populations and transitional populations, folks who are entering the area, some of our immigrant populations who are coming in with particular skills and maybe looking to apply and to shift. And so that's great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Mr. Prouty, do you want to continue through the packet?
Sure. So I will ask you to return to page one for a moment to go over some key highlights here. I neglected to do that earlier. some important pieces to note is that there's an increase in state aid as of the final day of the legislature, which resulted in $1.9 million more of the current fund for FY26. The college made some adjustments along those lines and adjusted the use of the fund balance. We'll be talking about that in a moment as we work through the packet. That also incorporated the pension cost shift. One note I should have mentioned earlier is that the county executive has indicated an amendment will be sent over and has not arrived yet. We got a message yesterday about the overarching changes that the county executive might recommend, but the specific amendments have not arrived at the council yet. So we should have those in a few days. Recommendation from council staff about that will come later. So let's move along in the packet then to page 9 and
Just on that point, Mr.
Yep.
Prouty, just since we have OMB, it's your understanding that that amendment is forthcoming to cover the pension cost shift?
That's correct. Yeah. It's roughly for the college's portion, it's a little bit over $1 million that will be added to the current fund in the updated council executive recommended budget.
Got it. Okay. Well, once we receive it, I'll speak for myself, but I think my colleagues probably would agree that we would accept that as part of a budget that is same services. So, go ahead, Mr. Prouty.
Thank you. So on page 9 of the packet, there is a proposal from Councilmember Albornoz and Joando in terms of the Collective Impact Institute from Montgomery College. The proposal is to allocate $550,000 as a startup for this institute. It would be a partnership between Montgomery College and another organization, and there's detail in the packet and the attachments, pages 65 through 68, so that might be an item for discussion right now.
Yeah, I was happy to support this last year, and again, with Councilman Ramanaz, I think, we have significant challenges in our community, also significant opportunities, and collective impact is a proven strategy to address them, but I will not steal the thunder of my colleague and let him talk about it. Councilman Ramanaz.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief because we have so many things to get through. But this is going to be my 20th year in county government, and I had a cup of coffee in the private sector, and then I worked 6 years in the nonprofit sector. So I've worked in all three sectors. And what I have found to be undeniably true is no one sector can address systemic issues that are facing our community. And we have to address those issues collaboratively if we're going to even have a chance to make the kinds of changes that all of us would like to see. And what I've also learned over these years is that there are just not enough times and spaces for us to collaborate among those three very important entities in a way that's authentic and strategic, leverages information, resources, everything imaginable. And I have also learned that during especially difficult times, such as the ones we are in now, true innovation is often born, whether it's programs or when situations force us to look in the mirror and out the window in ways that we haven't before, things can really move. And that's what we are facing right now. So every budget is difficult. This one is no different. This one has unusual layers to it that we're all very aware of. But I think this is a time for us to be bold and to think strategically about intentionally creating such a time and space. And one of my favorite organizations, I say this all the time, in Montgomery County is Montgomery Moving Forward, which has done a fantastic job over now more than one generation to bring us together in a way that's truly meaningful. And so last year I was excited to have fantastic conversations with Dr. Williams and his team about this exciting concept of having a collective impact institute, a literal brick and mortar space for us to be able to continue MMF's work, but do it in a way that is more sustainable and structurally sound, while also taking advantage of the college's tremendous resources, incredible talent, and their own information that they bring to the table through conversations such as this. And the cherry on top was having it be hosted in the East County at the new campus. to get something like this off the ground, MMF and stakeholders have been raising private funds, which is super important. But if we're going to authentically make this a public-private partnership, the public needs to step up. And so I'm once again, thank you colleagues who supported this unanimously out of committee, proposing that we offer seed funds that are critical to be able to do the strategic planning necessary to have a more full recommendation moving forward, but put the college in a position to be able to have the resources it needs to do this well. So we have been discussing sort of on the fly here. The request is for $550,000, which mirrors originally what we had requested last year. That was brought down to $350 to reflect last year's budget reality, which is even more challenging this year. And so I would like to move that we once again consider $350,000 in this year's operating budget to mirror our request from last year and put this in an even better position to be able to survive what we know will be a difficult reconciliation process as we go through. But that's the background and context. A lot of the information remains the same, but the issues that this Collective Impact Institute can tackle have become even more profound.
We have a motion.
Second.
There's a second. Anything, Dr. Williams, do you have anything you'd like to say? I know you sent a letter as well saying you like the idea, but want to give you an opportunity. Yeah.
Just to really affirm the letter of support that was sent last year. We remain steadfast in regard to the potential of this partnership. See Montgomery College as being a fantastic place to really bring us together and look towards the future of collective impact for Montgomery County. And just, I think it's just want to illustrate so that other folks know that we have already dedicated resources by way of having the conversations and ideating about what it could look like. So Montgomery College has been supportive of advancing this effort. So I just want to share that.
If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. As a African proverb that was made into a very good song in Mufasa. If you haven't seen it, I have kids that have seen it, and I enjoyed it as well. I enjoyed it as well. So we have a motion and a second, and again agree. And it's going to be a tough budget year, but I think this is a great investment when we're trying to tackle the opportunities and challenges before us. So without objection, we'll add that to the reconciliation list from the committee. And thank you for Montgomery moving forward, folks who are here, and also a big shout out to you and all the work that you continue to do in our communities. Mr. Friday?
Thank you. The last item for discussion today before the committee considers a recommendation is the fund balance. There's details here in the packet on pages 10 and 11. A couple of notes for the committee. The use of the fund balance to fund the current operating budget or the proposed operating budget was decreased on the basis of state aid, which leaves a larger projected available balance. If you look at the chart, you'll see that the balance is actually projected to decrease from last year to this year for FY 25 and 26. And that's in part due to a much larger use of the fund balance to help fund the operating budget.
Thank you. Any comment on that? If it's okay if you don't. I had just one question, and if colleagues have any other questions before we wrap up and make a final recommendation. I noticed that the AAUP agreement has been finalized, but the SEIU and AFSCME contracts had not been finalized as of the writing here. Is there any potential fiscal, what do you expect the potential fiscal impact of that to be, if any? I'm assuming it would be contained within your budget request.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice President. The short answer is yes, it is contained and within our budget request, it's calculated for.
So those will be done at some point in the
Yes, and we just have one remaining. We had a board meeting on Monday where they were able to approve a second. And Mr. Clinton, if you want to provide any more details about.
Yeah, and we expect to have the final agreement ratified with AFSCME by the end of the month.
Great. Awesome. Anything from you, Colin?
No, good.
So I think, Mr. Priddy, are we ready for recommendation on the overall budget?
Indeed we are. Thank you.
Okay, so I thank you again for all your work. I think without objection, we will move your full budget forward, and with the addition, and then pending the adjustment on the transfer pension shift. All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, council members. Have a great day.
All right. So our next item, we have Montgomery Coalition for Adult English Literacy. Come on down. Good to see you. We've got some alumni from that organization in the audience too. As you're getting your seat, I'll just say I really enjoyed the spelling bee this year. It was as always, but it was really awesome, and just a great event, community event. Ms. Cummings, are you leading us off here? Okay. I know we're playing musical chairs. We could do a little spelling bee too. Yeah, if you want. When we start, can everyone just introduce themselves when we start with that? Because there's some new, slightly new faces. Start, yeah, just hit your mic there. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, thanks. I'm Emma Starr. I'm the Communications and Content Director from MCAEL.
Awesome.
I'm Gerard Etienne, the incoming Executive Director.
Tom Colling, I'm Manager of Administration and Grants.
Sean Klein, I chair the Board of Directors of MCAEL.
I'm Deborah Lambert with the Office of Management and Budget.
Let's see.
And I'm Rudy Jung. I'm the Director of Programs at MCAEL.
Awesome. Ms. Cummings?
Kristen Cummings, Legislative Analyst with County Council. Today we have the Montgomery County Coalition for Adult English Literacy, NDA. This is a same services budget for the NDA this year with a 3% inflationary increase in the amount of $75,361. I know that our partners with MCAEL brought some slides to share with us today. I did just want to take a moment to note that we're excited to welcome Mr. Etienne, the new Executive Director of MCAEL, today with us. He'll be starting in May. And with that, I may turn it over to our partners here to share a little bit more information.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to update you on MCAEL's work. I'm going to make a brief statement, then I'm going to ask Gerard to say a few words, and then Rudy will go over some of the most recent data on learners and classes. As you know, MCAEL was founded to coordinate the network of adult ESOL classes and programs in Montgomery County, and we continue to build an efficient, cost-effective, and connected network of English language programs. Through our continuous improvement model, we see year-over-year progress among even the well-established programs and work to nurture new and emerging programs. We have made significant progress on our 2024 to 2026 strategic plan, focusing on addressing the gaps in areas with limited English learning opportunities, promoting learner-centered instruction, and building learner perspectives into our programming. The need for adult ESOL services in the county continues to grow. An estimated 139,000 adults in Montgomery County speak English less than very well, according to the latest American Community Survey data. This is up from 134,000 the previous year. While the coalition serves more learners each year, the population in need is growing faster than the coalition can currently support. MCAEL's recommended budget from the county executive for fiscal year 2026 represents a 3% or $75,000 increase to its fiscal year 2025 contract. MCAEL welcomes this increase, particularly given the difficult nature of this year's budget. It will allow us to award more in grant funding to reach more learners and enhance our outreach and programming capacity. Our core work continues to be building and strengthening adult ESOL programs through grant funding and professional development for instructors and program administrators. The packet you have includes an update on this work, as well as some other program highlights, such as the Learner Leadership Group, a training course in development, and a recent instructor survey. As I mentioned earlier, we are very excited to have Gerard Etienne join MCAEL as its next executive director. Gerard comes to us after a robust search process that began at the end of last year. He brings a deep personal connection to MCAEL's mission and is the ideal choice to lead MCAEL into its next chapter. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gerard to share a little bit about himself.
Thank you, Sean, and good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Gerard Etienne, and I am the incoming executive director, and it is quite an honor to have been selected for this role. MCAEL's mission is very personal to me. I'm an immigrant myself. I came to the United States when I was 13. My first language is French, and I didn't speak English. I went directly into the American school system. So I experienced firsthand the challenges of what it means to learn English, to go to school, and to be able to just manage daily things as an immigrant. Professionally, I started off in the for-profit sector. I was trained as an engineer. I went to the University of Maryland. I earned my MBA at the University of Maryland as well. I went into management consulting. But it wasn't until I started volunteering for an organization called Interfaith Works, which I'm sure you're well familiar with, in their vocational services program. I volunteered for IW for 7 years. I joined their board of directors for 2 years. And when I had the opportunity to join their staff as the director of the vocational services program, I did so. And after Interfaith Works, I went to the Jewish Council for the Aging, or JCA, as their Chief Program and Innovation Officer, where I oversaw 11 different programs. And funny enough, my last day at JCA was yesterday. I'm a longtime Montgomery County resident. I've lived here for, I haven't done the math, but it's probably close to 40 years at this point. Got married here. I have 2 kids that were born here, then went to school here. So I'm deeply committed to Montgomery County. I'm deeply committed to MCAEL's mission. I look forward to meeting you all, hopefully under less formal circumstances, and I certainly look to collaborating with you and to collaborating with other organizations to continue MCAEL's incredibly important mission. Thank you.
Well, welcome, Mr. Etienne. And it shows how committed you are. You ended one job and then you showed up the next day before you're even getting paid to advocate for your budget. So, welcome. So is there a presentation here that you want to go through?
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Rudy for that.
Great.
Yes, hi.
Go ahead.
So we thought we'd just share a few data points on our grant partners. Currently, we are supporting 24 organizations for 29 adult ESOL programs. So this represents the most recent data from mid-year reports for the period July to December. And you can see on a bar chart on the far right is our most current figures for the end of 2024. We had 3,500 plus unique learners and 4,366 duplicated learners. That means the total enrollment. So if a learner goes into a class in the summer and they continue into the fall, they're counted twice. So that's how we get that number. We wanted to show the year-over-year comparison because you can see there's a strong increase from the year before for the same period. And we especially like to see that unique learners figure keep growing. On the next slide here, we just wanted to show how classes are delivered. So in 2024, from July to December 2024, you can see 146 in-person classes offered. Those are the red that's featured on the bottom in the red, and that's a good increase from the year before. We're particularly pleased to see the growth of in-person classes, especially at beginning levels, because beginning level learners just learn so much better in person. And so this chart also shows the progress from the pandemic year where everything was online. And you can see also the growth of hybrid classes. More organizations are able to provide classes where you have learners some at home and some in the classroom at the same time. The slight decrease for 2024 is because one of the organizations that was offering those was not funded this year by MCAEL. And finally, a breakdown of learners by region. So you can see on the far right, for this fiscal year, I do need to point out a discrepancy. Unfortunately, I would love to see that East County had 16% of the learner population served. Unfortunately, we found a discrepancy there, and it's because of the way we do it in terms of zip codes and how they fit into the regional service center areas. It's more like 8%, and so, but anyway, this gives you an idea that it is still increasing, just slower than.
Can I just clarify? Thank you for that. Is that discrepancy, so that's only for 2025? So we're apples to apples?
It's 2024 and 25 what's showing there. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
all right,
so it's more like 8%. And so the mid-county figure is higher, and the East County figure is lower.
Got it, thank you.
I'm sorry about that.
Well, I look forward to working with you to get those numbers up to,
Yes.
up to even higher than 17%. So.
Yes, and as you know, we're working very with our community learning groups to have more starter classes in East County, and encouraging our grant partners also to have more classes in East County. So that's just a brief overview. I'm happy to leave it there and welcome any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you doing that. And again, welcome. We will certainly, have you back. We've got a busy day today, so I don't think we'll dive deep into the data today, but we'll have you back as we do at the E&C committee to go even deeper into, once you get rolling, we'll be curious to hear about your strategic plan and how you want to grow and continue the great work that's happening. But I think today before us, we have a pretty straightforward recommendation, right, Ms. Cummings, from the county executive?
Yes, council staff recommends approval as submitted by the executive, pending council action on the 3% inflationary adjustment, which will be approved as a separate item.
Yep, absolutely. Before we take action, Councilman Robiner.
Thank you. Just very, very brief. Want to acknowledge Kathy Stevens, who's in the audience, the former executive director of MCAEL, and welcome, Mr. Etienne. I have heard about you, and I'm a Terp myself, so you've already gotten off to a good start there, but really look forward to the collaboration and partnership. One of the great things that MCAEL has done under Kathy's leadership, and before that as well, is the cross-section of work with our Department of Health and Human Services. And what I would like to emphasize moving forward is particularly in the area of behavioral health and mental health. I think there's a lot of programming and partnership and collaboration to mine there. And I'd love to, at a later session, possibly even as early as this fall, talk about some sort of a joint session to talk about our immigrant community in particular, who, as we know, is under siege right now and being impacted in every way imaginable. So you all are at the forefront of that work, and that's why investments like this continue to be so wise, and why we thank our former colleague, Councilmember Tom Perez, for helping to establish MCAEL and get this incredible program off started. So look forward to the collaboration moving forward.
As do I. Thank you very much.
Councilmember May.
Thank you. I appreciate the point. And I'll say that I have seen that you all are active in working to expand the body of work that's happening in East County, and I appreciate that. Really, really critical. Obviously, we have really an influx of folks who speak other languages just in the last few years, even spiking in the east side of the county. And so I appreciate you all jumping on that. And obviously, the more we can continue to lean into that and to accelerate that work, there's a tremendous benefit that just touches really every sector that we fund here at the county. So thank you for that work. And I just wanted to welcome you as well, Mr. Etienne, and I'll say that your story it's like almost making me a little emotional, because in these times, this is exactly like what's happening at the federal level is obviously repugnant on so many levels in regards to the way that immigrants are spoken of and the way that they are being treated, when we know here in Montgomery County, and we live it every day on the ground, and it's part of my family story, and it's really part of almost everybody's family story, that immigrants are a huge, huge contributor in every way on the ground in our community. And so I'm excited about the opportunity always, but especially now, to lift up the reality of those stories, and we need to continue to do that loudly and proudly. Thank you for the tremendous contributions that you have chosen to bring here to our community. We are so glad to have you, and really grateful for the work that you're doing.
Here, I want to thank both my colleagues for their comments, and let's formally make sure we do an ECHHS committee in the fall, following up on the work that you all are doing around, and then connecting that with the mental health work. Literally, this committee wouldn't be sitting here if Montgomery County didn't accept some immigrants about 60 years ago. So all three of us are the product of immigrants who came here for a better life. So thank you, welcome. So without objection, we will approve the $75,000 3% in context of the larger 3% adjustments, and welcome you again, and look forward to working with you. And thanks to the board and to the team.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Last but certainly not least, turn to our MCPS colleagues for round number 2 here. And we are going to dig a little deeper into the cross-functional teams, that reorganization, and how what that means in special education, and aptly, given our last item, emergent multilingual students for services and needs there. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Prouty to tee us up, and then to the superintendent. And I want to acknowledge, I think I see 2 board members here, Rita Montoya and Laura Stewart in the back, and to anyone else who's watching, thank you, and the millions watching at home. I see Mr. Stein here from MCEA, so thank you to all the folks that have joined us. Mr. Prouty.
Thank you very much. So as you mentioned, Council Vice President Juando, we will be going over a number of items today, some connected to each other. In addition to special education and emergent multilingual learners, we'll be looking at the CREA Academy and additions to the budget proposed for that, the blended learning options, and then also newly constituted cross-functional teams, and the reorganization of the central office and how those have an impact in terms of the budget. So the first budget discussion item is special education. The proposed FY26 budget has an increase of 688 FTEs, which translates to $46.6 million in additional funding. This is intended to address shortfalls in the provision of services to students with IEPs and 504 plans. The superintendent and the board have noted that there is a significant shortfall in terms of these services at the moment due to staffing levels, and so the intended addition it will help to address those shortfalls. There's a number of items of information on the tables on pages 3 and 4. And final note here on page 4, it will be a challenge to fill all the new positions that are proposed, but MCPS is confident they will do so through expanded recruitment. Additional note that of the 500 para-educator positions that are proposed in the budget, 366 of those would be filled by a transition of some current parent educators from temporary part-time positions to full-time positions, which will enhance recruitment and retainment of these people as well by providing them a permanent job with benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, big topic, special education. So we'll take them, I guess, take these one by one, and I'll start if there's whoever, Superintendent Taylor. Do you want to say anything as well to get started?
Good morning, everybody,
Good morning.
and thank you for having us again. I normally don't roll this deep with a thick posse, but it's not really my style. But I'm delighted to have several colleagues here today, and one special colleague that I'm excited to introduce to you today. And I'd actually like for her to say a few words. It's my pleasure to introduce our new Chief Student Support Services Officer, and that is Dr. Margaret Cage. Dr. Cage comes to us from the New Mexico Department of Education, where she was the Deputy Secretary of Education who supervised special education for the entire state of New Mexico. She brings a rich history of serving as a principal all the way up through higher levels of school district administration and even state administration, and that wealth of experience she's bringing to Montgomery County, because we have some significant issues that we need to address in special education. And I'll save introductions for our other distinguished teammates later, but I did want to offer Margaret a few moments to say a few words about some of her thoughts as a very recent add to our team. She's really only been with us a couple weeks, so she probably is not going to answer a ton of questions. We can handle that, I think, on our side, and mainly their logistical questions and answers tied to the budget, so that's really something that we can handle. But we did want to offer Margaret a chance to speak. So if you'll turn on your microphone and welcome, Dr. Cage.
Welcome to Montgomery County.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me here today. First and foremost, I would like to say that I am honored to step into the chief role here at Montgomery County under the great visionary leadership of Dr. Thomas. I have followed him for quite some time, and I'm very honored to be able to work with him. As a long-term educator, I'm definitely committed to ensuring that all students receive a kid glove education, because I myself struggled through my educational experience. My parents both were very, very strict and stern about ensuring that we had an education, and I am the sixth child, the baby, of course, the spoiled one. And when I came along, they were really, really serious, and for good reason. My father had a third grade education at the time. That is as far as they allowed African American males to go. So believe it or not, he graduated from the third grade. And my mother had an 8th grade education. She struggled with severe dyslexia, undiagnosed, of course, because at that time technology was not great in the school system. And she dropped out in the 8th grade. So one of the things that she made sure to instill in us was that education was important. And I can also say that I am the only one out of my siblings with an advanced degree. Being the baby, I'm the lawyer, I'm the teacher, I'm everything that everybody comes to. So I am definitely grateful to be here. I can tell you this work is not easy. Almost 30 years as an educator, I have been on every level, as Dr. Taylor shared with you earlier. And every level has its own unique challenges, but across the board, very similar challenges in education today. I can tell you we have a clear, unwavering vision here in Montgomery County Public Schools, and Dr. Taylor and his staff that he has chosen definitely we have a big job to do. You know, we have a lot of things that we have to correct. I am coming to you from Louisiana. That is where I was born and raised and spent most of my educational career. Taught every grade except 2nd grade, why I don't know. Taught every subject. Special education certified, went through every single level of leadership, and I had the utmost pleasure of being able to start the inaugural office for New Mexico Public Education Department. There wasn't an office of special education there. So after a national search, I was hired to create one. And I did, and it is successfully thriving at this point. And I am now here and happy to serve and lead with Montgomery County and next to you guys and all of our stakeholders in the community. So thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for joining us and sharing some of your story. And it's a big job, an important job, and definitely can hear through your comments that you're committed to it. So, Dr. Taylor, back to you. Oh, and I will say, congrats on all your reorganizations and appointments you've been doing. I know you all have been churning those out, and you've taken a lot of good, you've poached a lot of good people from a lot of good places. I've noticed. So.
Tis the season, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Tis the season. We're here to answer questions that the council has, and would like to thank council staff for the very detailed report that you put together, in particular as it pertains to special education. We have one critical issue that we're trying to address this year. I'm disappointed to tell you that we are not solving any problems with special education, nor are we expanding our special education footprint, even though it may look that way on paper, that adding 688 positions looks like it's expanding our footprint. It is really just fulfilling what we say we are supposed to be doing in terms of our staffing guidelines and what we know we should be doing in terms of service to our kids. The biggest part of that footprint is 500 paraprofessional positions. This really came to a crisis point for us at the start of this school year when we discovered very early on, primarily in our elementary classrooms, that we were understaffed in paraprofessionals, particularly in critical staffing positions in our highest need classrooms with stable paraprofessional support. The primary personnel that are fulfilling that role in our critical staffed classrooms, our highest needs classrooms, are temporary part-time employees. They're not full-time benefited employees, and as I'm sure you can imagine, these are positions that have a high churn rate. As a matter of fact, they are the highest churn rate in the entire district in terms of our positions.
What is that rate? Just if you could.
Off the top of my head, I'm not certain, but it's double digits, which is higher than really any other thing that we have in the district. We can absolutely provide that to you because you're going to see us a lot this week.
Yep.
And you'll see us next week too. We'll make sure that we get you that churn rate and maybe even some comparison to some of the other positions that we have. In terms of special education staffing, we are very pleased, and I'm glad that you mentioned that we poach from other places, because that is our pretty successful recruitment strategy, is that Montgomery County is a great place to live, work, and learn. And as a consequence of that, we are a very attractive school system to work for. And we are very successful at having really talented educators from across the state and from across the region to join us from other areas and to join Team MCPS. Unfortunately, it comes at a great cost to public education as a whole. We are not seeing the steady stream of bachelors with 0 years of experience, or even masters with 0 years of experience, entering the career of public education like they used to. It's not as an attractive field. There are some significant barriers to public education being an attractive field, so our primary recruiting ground happens to be other districts. I'm proud to say that we started the school year this year with 99.5% of our special education positions filled. That's a very high rate. It is high for any position that we have, so we have a pretty high level of confidence that we can fill the vacancies that we have that were proposed in this budget. And we know that this is a gap that we need to fill, and it's absolutely critical for the students that we serve, our highest need students.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'll turn to colleagues. I think one thing I want to make sure that gets understood is, you've talked a little bit here today and a lot in the past about this is just getting us these 688 positions, which are broken down, 500 of which are for paraeducator positions. And then what's the subset of that are shift from part-time to full-time? That's 300?
360.
So that's all encapsulated in the 688. I just want to make sure that's clear. It's
not in addition to.
So it's 688, but 360 of those people are already working as temporary part-time.
Yeah, otherwise that number would be like twice what the budgeted request is. It would be much more significant. So we're using the funds that were already committed to that to offset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that's clear,
Yeah.
so that half of these people these people exist.
Yeah.
And they're in but they just aren't benefited and they aren't paid.
It's hard to believe with such a big number that's the discount number.
Right. I just think it's important to note that.
Yeah.
And then you said this is to just meet what we say we are doing. You've
Yeah.
said that phrase. I think we should talk a little bit about what we say we're doing. And
Yeah.
what does that actually mean? Like how are we staffing these, how are we supposed to be staffing these classes, and what's not happening, and what this would change?
So we have staffing guidelines that govern how we allocate staffing to each school. And this was something that was featured prominently in budget discussions last year when the Board of Education was short requisite funds, and as a result, one of their budget decisions was to raise class size by one. That was really a mathematical formula that took the average of class sizes from across the district. It didn't actually add one child to every classroom, but rather took the mathematical average and adjusted the formula. Similarly, in general education, we also have a formula for special education and our EML, or emergent multilingual learner classrooms, where we are supporting students by staffing ratios. And depending on student needs, that staffing ratio may be different based on different disability categories and services that are provided to a group of students. And I'll give you some examples. If you have a student who is accessing the general curriculum, but still requires some accommodation, still has a resource class, we may be staffing students that fit that characteristic at a ratio closer to 20-1 or 25-1, which makes a lot of sense. But you may also have a student that has severe medical needs and requires constant and direct supervision, and they may be staffed in a classroom that's as small as 8-1, and maybe even 8-1 with a teacher and a paraeducator in that classroom, because they may have toileting issues or feeding tubes or other medical needs where we need to provide something that is a little bit closer of a ratio of 1-1 or 2-1 in terms of adults to children. And so when we are fulfilling that staffing guideline, and when we're fulfilling that need, our classrooms, we're meeting the needs of our students, or we're getting closer to meeting the needs of our students. Unfortunately, where we have been the last couple of years is that we've done a staffing projection based on numbers earlier on in this school year. We've issued that projection, and then as more students come or more students change throughout the year, we haven't updated the special education classrooms like we have been maintaining the general education classrooms. So as a consequence, something that may have been projected at a classroom that was 8-1 or 7-1 may end up actually being 10-1, 11-1, 12-1, 14-1 in an environment that is candidly unsafe or unproductive to meeting the educational goals of the students that are in that classroom. Really severe. That's where we're seeing the biggest uptick and the biggest challenges. It's not necessarily in every case our students that are accessing the general curriculum, although that is still somewhat the case, but it is some of our more higher needs classrooms that haven't gotten that updated adjustment. You may recall in a previous budget presentation that we're relatively flat in terms of enrollment, but we have two really significant enrollment changes over the last 5 years, actually 3 really significant enrollment changes. The first really significant enrollment changes, our farms rate has skyrocketed, up 14%. I mean, going from the 30s to the 40s in terms of our farms rate, that's significant. Another big adjustment, and we'll talk about it later, is the rapid increase in our emergent multilingual learners. The third and most significant one is, despite the fact that we're relatively flat in total population, our students with disabilities have gone up significantly. And the disability needs and services tied to those students have gone up significantly. What a lot of people don't connect the dots is, even though our overall population being flat, the students that we are adding, or better yet, the students that we're replacing in the district, have dynamic, complex, and way more significant needs than the students that are already housed within the school system. And so if we're not adjusting to meet those service needs and that level of care, we're going to start to see those gaps. Another dot that's difficult, I think, for some people to connect is the performance gap and how meeting the needs of our students with disabilities also impacts what happens for all educators and all classrooms. When we're able to meet the needs of our students with disabilities, we're able to make sure that resources are going to the right places, and that means that there's capacity that's freed up in other places for supervision. Right now, when there's not adequate supervision in a classroom for students with severe disabilities, the assistant principal or the principal or the instructional specialist or the reading specialist comes into backfill because it's a safety issue. Well, that means that they are not doing their assigned roles and that there's another gap that needs to be filled. So,
cascading.
yeah, and so general education suffers when special education is not attended to as well.
I appreciate the context. I know it was a long answer, but I think it's important to understand what's going on. One, that where these positions will go, half of them are already existing people that need to be retained and professionalized, and what the real needs are. I mean, I will tell you, as the parent of a special education student in MCPS in middle school, I have seen this firsthand. I've visited hundreds of schools. The number one thing you hear from special educators and general ed teachers that have to bat is that they're to the max on this issue. You know, you hear a lot of things, but I think if I had to pick one, this would be the one I hear the most. That it's just an unsustainable, untenable thing. And with the growth we've seen, as you said, we've got to address this in a significant way. I want to ask one more question, then I'll turn to colleagues. It was mentioned in the by Mr. Prouty that, so you'd have to hire. I'm doing math here, so you test my education here. So it was 360 that are the current. Okay, so you'd have to hire another 328, right? I think that's right, ish.
About half paraprofessionals,
Yeah.
half classroom teachers.
Teachers.
Yeah.
So how do you? Could you talk about the plan if this is allocated? Because this obviously we're going through this budget process through every committee. One of the questions will come up, and it always comes up in the budget context, and Ms. McGuire knows this, is will you be able to bring these people on? So if we allocate this money, will you be able to bring these people on within the fiscal year, which would be obviously within the school year?
It's difficult to speak in certainties, but I can tell you that there's a high probability of yes, and I can give you a couple of artifacts as to why. It looks like a big number of people, but this is well within the bounds of what we hire on a normal year anyway. We hire well over 1,000 educators throughout an entire scope of a year, every year. This is part of what we do. It's hard for people to conceptualize because we're an entity that has over 30,000 employees, 25 of which are full-time employees. But we do a significant amount of hiring each year. Hiring for special education professionals, it's a high needs area. We definitely would be targeting a lot of our recruitment strategies around targeting specifically special educators. And there are going to be some positions that we will have difficulty trying to find folks for. I've had a great amount of fun at Councilmember Katz's wife's expense trying to draw her out of retirement to be a speech language pathologist. And the reality is I'm only half joking because that is a high needs position that we will have trouble fulfilling. And it will be harder for us to fill the speech language pathologist positions than it will be for us to hire for some of the classroom positions. I think that we're in a place right now that, as dire and challenging as our economic times are, it actually presents favorably for us in the labor market. Right. It also presents favorably for us that we are a school system that has a positive reputation and that we're a great place to work, especially when we are investing in our employees and we're investing in creating the working conditions that communicate to our employees that they're valued. So there's a couple of things that I think are important in our recruitment strategy. Every budget is a great tool for communication. The council is communicating what it values when it is funding different things in the budget, just like the Board of Education and the superintendent are communicating the things that they value when we make a proposed budget for consideration. Special education, making sure that we are fulfilling our commitments to special education is a signal to other special educators that Montgomery County cares about students with disabilities. It's also a signal to general educators that we care about their working conditions and that we care about their environment as well, just like fulfilling our contractual obligations and just like fulfilling our salary promises to making sure that our staff can have a life and still live and work in Montgomery County.
I appreciate that. I'll pause there to turn to my colleagues. Councilmember Alvarez.
So I'm not going to bury the lead. I support this very much because of all the reasons you articulated, what I've experienced, what I've seen, the information I've received on the ground from families as well as educators. This is obviously long overdue. But my question is more, so we're adding these positions, critical, frontline, totally get it. But what systemically are we doing, Dr. Taylor? Because adding these positions is obviously not just it's not a first step, but how systemically are we going to have them be absorbed into a system that has not always been as prepared as it needs to be to address the myriad of needs? And there's wide ranges of needs of these children. You've mentioned some of the more significant examples, but there are other students who don't have quite the same level of need, but still have, need. Could you talk just more broadly about how you envision these new positions absorbing into that system and what adjustments you're going to be able to make on the ground?
Absolutely. I've got a short-term strategy and a long-term thing for us to think about. The long-term approach is that we really do need to reconceive special education from the bottom up entirety. All programs, all services, all approaches, and really reconceive it from every angle. Where we transport students, how we transport students, what services we provide, where we provide those services, all of that needs to be reevaluated. And it's going to be a bumpy road. It's also not an overnight fix. I think that our students, when they are served as close as possible to their home community and they see children, students with disabilities, when they see children that are in their same neighborhood, in their same school, that there's a benefit. That is not the case right now in Montgomery County, that services are not offered as close to home as they probably should be. And we have a myriad of reasons behind that, but we also have a lot of opportunity. While we're reevaluating boundaries, that also gives us an opportunity to evaluate programs, not just our magnet and exciting academic programs, but also our special education programs as well. So I think that there's a bigger picture and a long-term prospect of us really reshaping and thinking about this a little bit more holistically, about from beginning to end, from a service delivery mindset, not from a disability mindset, but from a service delivery mindset, how can we serve the needs of our students with disabilities differently? That's a big lift. I think I got the right person with a very compelling backstory to lead that effort. I'm very, very excited about that in the short term. I think that we can expect some pretty significant gains very early on by making a couple of tweaks. And we're going to talk a little bit about this later on in your agenda, but about how we deploy centralized services to actually help in the classroom, and how we deploy the folks that are assigned to the central office, so to speak, in a service mindset to actually providing instructional support, approaches, professional training, boots on the ground, job embedded in the moment. Right now, we're not doing that, or we're not doing that at scale. So I think that that's actually an intermediate step that's actually going to help us a lot. One of the bigger things that we're also looking at as an intermediate step is our placement practices. Are we placing students appropriately at a level that can meet their educational needs and also provide the services that they need to feel supported and grow in an educational environment. Right now, I'm not sure that we are, or at least not at scale. I think that there's pockets of excellence throughout the district. I think that there's things that we can be proud of, but I think that there's also an equal measure, maybe even more so, of things that we really do need to address. I'm not proud to tell you that, but it is one of those things that if we could substantively address the needs of our students with disabilities, performance in the district would soar both in the general education space and in the special education space.
That's really helpful. And I really want to acknowledge the board that, I've had the opportunity to work with now for 6 years and a number of members. And I have seen the evolution, and I really appreciate the efforts that they've made, because Montgomery Taxpayers League every year makes a similar recommendation, which is that we should be tying any additional funds to MCPS to benchmarks so that, we know, in their words, not mine, we're getting the most bang for our buck. I think that's a bridge too far. I don't think that's appropriate. We're not the subject matter experts, but I understand the sentiment from which they are coming, because we have made significant investments, especially over the last 3 years, that are not sustainable. $280 million is more than half of the entire operating budget of the Department of Health and Human Services. We cannot keep doing this, but we also need to acknowledge the reality and the emergency and the urgency that all of us are feeling right now. And Vice President Juando and I have had this conversation many times over many years, that it does feel like if we don't get in front of this, we're really going to be even more trouble than we are now. Especially, none of us could have anticipated what's happening at the federal level, which is going to make our work even harder. So it does make sense for us to make these investments, but I appreciate you, especially in the way that you discussed this just now, talking more definitively about how these investments will lead to those benchmarks, those gains that all of us want to see. All of us want to see. And then empower our incredible Board of Education to ensure that on an everyday basis, they're helping to follow through and be a partner along with the council, but in particular the board, who's in a better position to be able to track the everyday. So I think that I am going to look forward to regular check-ins, as we have under the leadership of Chair Juando over these last 2 years, where we ask tough questions and expect transparency, as you have delivered, Dr. Taylor, in your short time here. That gives me more confidence than in years past, because I'll be candid. We have appropriated funds for specific line items that I can't say with 100% degree of certainty went to what they were appropriated for. I feel more confident now than I have in the past that that will be the case, and that's why I'm more comfortable with this very large request, which makes me queasy. And again, not sustainable. We can't come back here again next year with even something close to what you all are asking for now. It's not going to work. But I do think that this line item in particular is important to highlight because it does represent getting us back to more solid ground. So with that, I yield back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Councilmember Mink.
Not a lot to add to that, actually, so appreciate that. And important to note, as is noted in the packet and has been noted in conversations, that the cost of not making this investment is significant. And so we always have to be weighing that. And I think the importance of the spirit with which you and your team and the board have come to these conversations with kind of a radical transparency. We have to just be open about all of the things that are not working. It does not work to try to paper over it, because the students and the parents, the families, the teachers, the staff, they all know the realities on the ground anyway. And we cannot solve the problems if we're not open and honest about them. And that's exactly what MCPS is doing, what this board is doing, and that's what's allowing us to have these conversations and allowing us to have the kind of confidence and allowing the public to have the confidence that the dollars are going to go to where they say that they're going to go and to where you say they're going to go. So I also look forward to hearing more about how this is going to be rolled out. Dr. Cage, really excited to have you, to have somebody coming in with real systems experience who can bring that perspective is very exciting. The work here is massive, so it is a large scale investment. But if we don't make it, I just don't see how we pull MCPS to where it needs to be and where the public expects it to be.
Really appreciate the comments of my colleagues, and just want to emphasize, I think the packet notes we're projecting 23,000 students with disabilities next year, 23,200. Just how significant of a number that is. And how fast it's risen, and how multi-layered and diverse the needs are, and the impact on general education. I'm really glad you made that point. So I think I had one other question related to special education, then we can move on. And Dr. Cage, I'll just mention, it reminded me, my mom is the youngest of 6, so those are some extraordinary people that are the youngest of 6. So so and she does everything for everybody else too. So I really resonated with that point. Some of the state data showed that Montgomery County is still exceeding the target for students in highly restrictive environments. Could you talk about the relationship of these positions to that, what I would say is not a good statistic?
It's a terrible statistic, and I think it accentuates this point precisely. And it's difficult too for us, and I wish I'd mentioned this earlier, 600 positions feels like a lot, 688 feels like a lot, but divided amongst 200 campuses, it's about three positions per campus. That's not how they'll be allocated. They'll be allocated based on where the students are and where the needs are, but 3 FTEs this is not solving any problems. And I want to be very clear about that this is just bringing us up to even. It is not by any means a panacea, nor is it correcting a long-standing issue. And I too want to praise the Board of Education for seeing this as a critical issue. This has been at the forefront of every conversation about academic performance that the board has had. From the time that I've been here to many years prior to that. So making sure that we bring that target below range and that we are meeting state expectations is a minimum expectation. That's not the goal.
Right.
That's the minimum expectation. We are not meeting the minimum expectation. This puts us on the path. It doesn't solve that problem, but it puts us on the path.
I appreciate it. All right, well, let's move on to the next item.
So the next item is emerging multilingual learners. The proposed budget would have an increase of 47 FTEs, which translates to $4.2 additional $1 million to hire more teachers for the EML program. Chart on page 5 shows the growth in terms of enrollment for emerging multilingual learners over the past several years. The projected enrollment for next year is up almost 1,000 from the prior year. And if you continue the packet, you'll see on the top of page 6 the ratios in terms of each level. And the majority of hiring for FY26 proposed would be at the secondary level, middle school and high school, but also some additional teachers at elementary school as well. Middle of page 6 notes the use of these additional personnel to enhance co-teaching in content area classrooms, to revamp the provision of English language development in terms of course structure and resources, and to help evaluate the program for students with limited interrupted formal education, which are also growing in number. There's an additional note here on page 6 and 7 about a position called the Emerging Multilingual Learners Therapeutic Counselor. This has come up in a number of different forums, so I want to be sure to include information for the committee about that position.
Thank you very much. And just as a reminder, we're going through the items that cost money. And that's what we're doing in budget session, and that's people in most of our budget, particularly in MCPS.
90%.
Exactly. So we did obviously the contracts, which have been jointly reviewed as a part of the Government Operations Committee, which looks at all of the contracts, and then obviously will be concurrently reviewed here in the context of the overall recommendation we make on April 30th. Is the biggest number, but these other additions are big pieces, and that's why we're going through them, just to remind folks of that context. So the EML context, it looks like there's 47 ELD teachers being added here. So I just wanted to offer you any context you want to make about the importance here, or any other points from you or your team.
Same story, different title. In the interest of time, I'll share that the narrative around our students with disabilities could be replicated for our emergent multilingual learners. It is the fastest growing student population in Montgomery County Public Schools. Their needs are dynamic. They are assigned levels based on performance on an English proficiency examination, WIDA, and services are aligned based on their level of English proficiency. The lower the English proficiency, the lower the level, the higher the proficiency, the higher the level, and the fewer services. So if we have more level 1 students, that means that there is intensive support and services that are needed to be provided, versus more level 4 students, which means that they're about to exit the program and will receive less services and monitor and consult services. This is a group of students that too has fallen short of meeting our staffing guidelines of what we have already been doing and what we say that we're doing, and keeping pace with this. I really like what Councilmember Albornoz had said about getting ahead of an issue. This is not getting ahead of the issue. This is just trying to keep up with the issue. We do not have a generous staffing ratio to serve our EML students. We have a barely adequate staffing ratio, and this is to meet that barely adequate staffing ratio.
And it was mentioned 1,000. If you look at the chart, obviously this has gone up every year, but the projection for next year is to be over 30, almost 34,000, looks like.
Yeah, and if I can add one more dimension to this, it's not just that we're adding 1,000 students, but it's 1,000 students at various levels of English proficiency. And I will say that the services required to meet the needs of a newcomer level 1 EML student at the high school level are going to be very different than the services needed to meet a level 1 EML student at the elementary level. The probability of English proficiency for the elementary student who is a newcomer is a lot greater than the probability of English proficiency by the time they graduate from high school if they're a newcomer in high school. And that also brings up another budget topic, which I'm sure you're going to get into in a minute, which is CREA. So we have some dots to connect with this, but the narrative is very similar to special education and just trying to allocate staff that's going to better meet the needs of our students.
Start with Councilmember Mink this time.
Appreciate that. Obviously, the staffing here is increasingly important given what's happening with our population. The ETCs that we are losing, some of them are some of the only folks we have that speak some key languages. Obviously, there's a huge difference between having a person who can connect with students, who can speak the same language, who comes from a recognizable cultural background, as opposed to using a language line. Can you talk about efforts to retain those folks and how we're going to try to make sure that those students are still able to be served in a comparable fashion?
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, this is a talented group of teammates that provide a tremendous service to this community of learners. And our goal would be to hang on to everybody, and in different capacities and different roles. How they're tagged right now with this particular job description does have a tremendous amount of overlap with other job descriptions that we have in other parts of the school system. Social workers, PPWs, parent, community coordinators. We have a lot of overlap in some of those positions, and we are in the process of kind of evaluating and assessing how we might come up with a mechanism to kind of suss that out a little bit and to have a more streamlined and efficient allocation of resources that match a specific job description for a specific role. The language piece is a bonus. It's not a prerequisite. Just because you speak a certain language doesn't mean that that's the only group of students that you're going to work with, that you're going to be able to serve. And I would caution people from making that association that there's that assumption that because you speak this language that you're only working with this group of kids. You're actually working with a much, much broader group of kids. And truthfully, a large group of our ETCs actually speak multiple languages, not just one or two. And so they're high value to us, and us trying to find the right seat at the right table is really one of the challenges. We're also trying to right size the district right now in terms of like what is a deployed resource that should be in a school versus what needs to be tagged as a central office staff employee. Right now our ETCs are actually central office employees. They're not school-based employees. So a lot of our push too is like what resources can we actually deploy to a school where it makes sense.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And, noting that this is a particular situation where they're tagged as central, but they spend, of course, most of their time in the schools. And certainly agree that, of course, these folks are highly skilled and they work with lots of different kids. Also noting that we do have certain populations that are growing rapidly who speak particular languages, and very few staff members across the district who speak some of those languages as well. And so we have got to retain, we have some of these folks already within the MCPS system. We have to hold on to them. They have relationships with families, and some of these families are not easy to break into in the social emotional sense. As someone who's working with some of those families also through my office, the work to build that trust is so key to what is eventually resulting in learning outcomes, for those students. And so I recognize, of course, that this is all a tough balancing act, and I appreciate the work that you all are doing there, and I look forward to further conversations, but just want to really make sure that I put in a strong plug, because a lot of these kids who are impacted do live in my district, and so I see a lot of that on the ground, and the necessity to, while yes, all of these folks can and do serve many students, including whether or not they speak, a certain language that's hard to hire for. Those students have to be served. They have to. I know I'm telling you something already now, but I'm saying it anyway. Those students have to have somebody available who's there, who can speak that language, and that's our top priority for every student as well. And so, as you walk that line, that's certainly figuring out how you all are making that magic happen. We'll be interested to hear about that. Thanks.
Yeah, and I just want to double tap before turning to Councilman Robinaz. Obviously, we heard at our budget forums and in other forums from a lot of these great ETCs who are extremely talented, and any superintendent is understandably going to come in and do a reorganization and address challenges and opportunities. And we're going to talk about the cross-functional teams in a moment as an example. I want to impart, and we have two board members here too, just that this is something we're going to have to make sure we want to keep these folks, make sure the students that they're serving get served, and that everyone understands how the new models are going to work. I mean, change is always hard in the sense that people don't know exactly what it's going to look like. And so I think the communication throughout the process is going to be really important. I know you know that, but wanted to make that point. Go ahead, Councilor May.
And I'll just note also that I think those folks themselves who's, lost their positions but are going to hopefully gain another position that's going to help everything work even better, that obviously their voices in the conversation of how they can make sure that they stay in touch with those families who most need them, I'm sure, again, I know you already know this, but I'm saying it anyway, are going to be really critical here, because they know a lot of those families really well and where they are and what kind of time and interaction and all of that. And so want to make sure that they're not out there looking for other jobs. We need them, and we need their advice here. So thank you again for that work.
Councilman Roberts.
Thank you. So I think, well, first of all, what an asset it is to have so many multilingual learners in our system. Just professionally moving forward, and it is a tremendous asset. I guess, and similar to my question with special education, I know we're going to discuss this in different ways throughout the course of these conversations over the next few days and into the new fiscal year as well. But dramatic changes are going to be made, need to be made in this area because we have not been fully meeting the needs of students for a long time now. I appreciate you acknowledging and completely agree that we need to be concentrating on the middle and high school years, because there's layers of needs beyond the multilingual capacity and learning. There's a lot of social and emotional needs that come with these students who have very complex backgrounds and very complex family dynamics. But could you discuss briefly, similar in the way that you did with special education, what some of those short and long-term benchmarks you anticipate being with an investment like this that will put you in a better position to be able to achieve those short and long-term strategies?
Well, fortunately, I already have a playbook from which to work from. There was a very comprehensive report that was done, the CAL report. You've actually received a briefing on it in the past. That was done, I want to say, a couple of years ago for the district in terms of improvements that we need to make to our EML program. And it's a great playbook. And we need to start making progress on that in a more substantive way than we have. There's a lot of room for us to improve our approach in terms of a couple of things. One is solidifying our classroom strategy in terms of how we are serving the needs of our EML students. Right now, we have a portfolio approach where it's different in every school. And that one approach may be very successful in one school and not successful in another school. I got to tell you, the team that our Delmy team that is working behind this has done tremendous work in the past, at least in the past year that I've seen, in terms of professional learning and enhancing that space. They really have done a great job of trying to elevate that work, but there's so much to do. Having a consistent approach, having consistent guidelines, having something that's actually followed and some accountability behind that, I think will go a long way. Similar to special education, these are our two fastest growing student populations, but also our two lowest performing student groups. That's it. That's where the investment needs to be. That needs to be not just in dollars, but also time and people and energy. What we're looking at, what the council holds us accountable to, what the Board of Education holds us accountable to, needs to be viewed through these two lenses, because that's where our challenges are. We address these adequately, and the district is moving in the right direction because it frees up capacity for us to do other things as well. So, and we can talk about CREA too. We kind of didn't spend a whole lot of time on that, but one of the things that landed in this budget has been a pain point for the district for the past couple of years, because it's this wonderful program that serves the needs of students who quite literally run out of time. And cannot meet the requirements for graduation to earn a diploma. And so we provide a supplemental service that is not required by law, but it is absolutely the right thing to do for our community by providing GED services and industry certifications to students who run out of time because of English language developmental skill deficits. Fantastic. And the General Assembly helping us out a little bit this year, with Maryland being the last state to adopt changes to its GED, where the English language section, we were the only state in the union out of 50 states that required the literacy portion to be in English only versus in Spanish or in other languages. That is something that the General Assembly helped us correct under the guidance of the legislative program from the Board of Education. That will help tremendously. That will also set our kids on a path to be successful when maybe the traditional pathway isn't going to be so successful. One of the things that we did in this budget was to establish a consistent, stable line item for CREA and to expand CREA so that we can have more student capacity. And this may even include students who are not having English language deficiencies, but maybe need an industry certification and GED support. But this is the primary focus of that program. It's a way for us to close a significant community gap. And I think to Councilmember Mink's point, the consequences of not supporting this program are really disastrous for the community in terms of making sure that our kids have something that they can look forward to in a fruitful life and a career.
That's really helpful. And then it goes without saying, I'm preaching to the choir, but having multilingual staff, not just in the classroom, but in the administration of a school and the central office of a school, so that we're engaging parents in a way that's holistic, that they're able to process and absorb information, is very important as well. Not a specific line item, but I know there has been an emphasis, and there will continue to be an emphasis on making sure our staff reflect the diversities of the communities we are serving. That's particularly true, needs to be true in schools with higher percentages of EML learners. I know that's something your administration has taken to heart, and I've been very impressed with some of our recent principal placements that acknowledge that. But we have to keep that going and just acknowledge the reality on the ground, because that's the only way we're going to make a dent in this area, is in addition to serving the direct needs of the students, but holistically serving their families as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for bringing up CREA. You checked something off of our list as we went. I want to just say this because I think, again, it's a lot of numbers, a lot of things being thrown around. Our average EML to teacher ratio is 38-1. The report that you cited, the CAL report, or the Center for Applied Linguistics Commission, released a couple years ago, said that the U.S. Department of Education's ratio for ELD teachers should be 1 to 12 to 1.
Yep.
Okay. And so obviously got a ways to go. What would this 47 FTEs do to those numbers?
It would actually bring us up to the 38-1.
Right. I just want to be, yeah, so I appreciate that.
It does not move us any closer to 12-1. It actually brings us up to what we tell people that our ratio is, not what it actually is. And it helps us keep pace with our growing student population. It does not actually improve our standing.
Yeah.
Which
So
is a disappointment, candidly.
No, it is. And I also, my good friend and fellow father of four, I often say we've got 10 kids up represented here on this committee. We have to, not just, this is a treading water, getting our head above water budget, but we're going to have a long-term plan. I think that the point this was just made, and I appreciate Councilman Ravna's asking the question that elicited the answer, as well as Councilman Mink. If we make progress in these two populations, we're going to dramatically improve student achievement in MCPS, and not just for these students, but for general ed students.
Absolutely.
It's a high yield, pressure relieving, not only right thing to do, legally mandated. How many descriptors do you need that of how important this is, but also not where we need to be. And just kind of, so I just think we will have to, while we can never do anything all in one year, and I know you're aware of that, we're going to have to still even, put ourselves on a path over multi-years to get better here. But I think that will become easier when people see progress, and I am confident that with these investments that we will start to see that progress. Mr. Prouty, next item.
Sure. So just one additional note about CREA, that the budget request is 14 positions and $1.7 million. The following item is the blended online virtual and distance learning options. The proposed budget would request 22 additional FTEs for this program, which translates to $2.1 million. Similarly to CREA, it would take folks who are currently staffing it as temporary part-time employees, make the staff more permanent. On page 8 of the packet, there's a list of where these people will, what the kind of work they will do and how they will provide instruction. The blended learning is intended to help students who are long-term medically impact students via both synchronous and asynchronous instruction in a virtual environment. There's a number of folks at the budget hearings and other budget forums who've spoken about this. Important to note that these students were getting individual, small group, and one-on-one lessons, and that high school students enrolled here are also able to access AP and dual enrollment opportunities. These students remain enrolled at their home schools while they're participating in blended learning, and there is a chart here on page number 9 which details the different positions which would be added.
Really appreciate that, and obviously this was a topic of a lot of conversation over the last couple of years, and it continues to be a topic. I've said, and I don't think Superintendent disagrees, but you can certainly say if you do, that we need an online learning tool that can be used by any parent or student who wants to use it, but particularly for our students that have severe disabilities and restricted environments. Could you talk about what this will do and what it won't do, and what your plan is for going forward? So short term and I guess long term again.
Well, this is actually really exciting because there is no future for public education or really MCPS or really any school district in the country that does not have a virtual component of some manner or form. What makes this exciting is the potential for us to do a great number of things. Online learning is not great for every kid. Just ask 4 out of my 5. Didn't work. And it wasn't great for a lot of our kids during the pandemic, but it is great for some kids. And it is a great option for a lot of kids and families. It is actually a necessity for some of our kids. And although we're not able to fully accommodate every request and every need right now, it is important that we take care of the things that we need to do. I very much wanted to bring forward to the Board of Education, and I think the Board of Education saw this and adopted a budget that was reflective of what we need to do. And what we need to do is make sure that every kid can access our great course offerings and make sure that they have a fulfilled, free, and appropriate public education. Well, this is a big component of that. If you're on a transplant list, it makes it really hard to come to school. If you have a chronic illness where your access to social interactions, your access to course content is limited, it makes it really hard for you to come to school. We need to have an environment where you can thrive. And so although there was a reduction that eliminated the MVA program in the previous budget year, and a tough choice that the board made given the difficult financial times, we created a program that really was a Band-Aid to get us from last year to this moment right now. And I don't think that it's reflective of our intentions of what we'd like to do moving forward, because we really cobbled this together from several different funding sources to make sure that we were minimally meeting as many needs as we possibly could. And I think that that's a good way of saying that we really did not do as well as we would like to have done in terms of meeting both social needs as well as academic needs, and create a sense of fulfillment and belonging that our kids really enjoyed with our previous virtual program, as well as that academic fulfillment. So I think that with this expansion, we're doing a couple of things. One, we're creating a stable line item in the budget that's predictable from year to year to year, and that can either go up or down based on student enrollments. And I think that we're creating that mechanism for that to happen. So that's one thing that we're doing. With this, I think we're also going to be able to provide some stability and some programmatic expectations where there can be some social interactions as well as some academic robust programming. The additional thing that I think will be a huge boon for us as a district is giving us the ability to leverage some future distance learning opportunities. And I'm going to give you an example. One of the things that makes MCPS great is that we have this course adoption process where students and educators can propose courses that are discrete courses offered in secondary schools. But typically, it's usually just that one teacher who can teach it in that one school, and it's not something that's offered throughout the district unless that it kind of catches fire and it gains grassroots, but yet every student in the district can see that course description and that course title in our course catalog, but access to that specialty program is a real issue for us. For me, that's a huge equity concern. Because if you're a student at Damascus High School and you see a course at Paint Branch that you'd really like to take, how on earth are you going to be able to access it? Well, we have a mechanism to support that. And I think that we can spend this year fleshing out some of the logistics on how we can make that distance learning connection a little more seamless, so that kids from across the district really can have access to our full course catalog of offerings and not just limited to the things that are in their campus. So I think that there's really a multifaceted approach that our virtual footprint needs to look like, and it's tagged as the blended learning program because yes, that's primarily what we're looking at. But I'd like for council to start thinking about it in the context of like, what does our virtual portfolio look like, and how are we providing a variety of services to students, not just in that one narrow scope for that one group of kids that can't access the general education space.
Appreciate that. Councilmember Mink?
Thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective, and that's an exciting opportunity that you point out. And as you know, as anybody who's got kids, of course, can tell you, everybody's got different learning styles, and for some kids, virtual learning is going to not work at all, as you noted. I have one of those as well. And for others, there are some kids who really, really thrive, and we now have, relatively late-breaking data that shows that from our own, MVA as well. So I appreciate the, the approach to really think through this in a fulsome way. There's a lot of opportunities here that we can leverage. And I also appreciate you starting off with, per the trend here, being very transparent about the fact that the blended learning program and what was provided for these students was not adequate. It really fell short of where everyone wanted it to be. Yes, it was a tough budget year. It was a Band-Aid. It was a lot. It was cobbled together, and that, unfortunately, that was the experience for the kids who ended up there. And because it was, given the fact that the program was limited to students who had a medical condition that prevented them from being able to attend school, what we ended up with was a group of kids specifically with chronic and serious medical conditions who they specifically got a just wildly inadequate academic and social emotional experience. And so there is a necessity to make sure that that does not happen again. This is something that we need to provide, and it has to be equitable. I'm nervous, honestly, about what the scores that we're going to be getting back, because I know that there were kids who did not have, science or social studies or some of the baseline classes until late in the school year. We have kids who are receiving half the amount of, English and math instruction synchronously than other kids are receiving in school. But, I say synchronously, but that implies that they're really getting something valuable asynchronously, and that's just not the case. And so, the recognition of that, just like the recognition of some of our other deficiencies, is important, and the determination to make improvements. And I think, to hammer home some of the points that you made, like the social emotional component, as we've all talked about, that component is not a nice to have when it comes to learning outcomes. That's a must have. And so, having a classroom, a home base for kids who are accessing school virtually, where they log in the morning and they have a morning meeting to get, just like kids who are in-person school, where they can see their classmates. I was really surprised to see it on the website about the BLP, that in the BLP, the kids are supposed to have they have their Zoom screens on for the portions of the lesson for which that's required. But the teachers are the ones who see them, and the kids don't see each other unless there's a particular reason for that, and the teacher's supposed to tell the parents in advance. But that just felt very dystopian for me. You've got these kids who are probably hungering for social interaction, and there's maybe another kid or two, because these classes are not large, and that's another thing where I think expanding the eligibility here makes a lot of sense fiscally. If we're going to have teachers who are leading these classes, there should be more than 1 or 2 kids in it. That's also a social emotional benefit for those kids. But again, as we saw with the MVA, there are kids who don't have necessarily that medical necessity who do thrive there. And so again, I think from a fiscal perspective, that's something that's important. But just thinking about those kids logging on, and those kids are there and they're not even seeing them, it's just really heartbreaking. And so I see that we've got full-time positions that are coming on. Can you talk a little bit about how you're going to use those FTEs? And I know that there's a lot of TBD in here. But can you talk a little bit about how you're going to use those FTEs to give those kids that social emotional experience and that feeling of grounding and of community?
Yeah, so a lot of the reason why it's TBD is because it's enrollment based, and the target objective here is to provide a comprehensive K through 12 experience and to be able to provide courses across that bridge. So for example, we may have an English teacher who is virtually teaching English 7, 8, and 12. Just like we may have a social studies teacher who is teaching the middle school history curriculum as well as part of the high school history curriculum. So that explains some of the TBD components. But I think that there's an opportunity for us to assess student interest and to see what the kids are interested in terms of what makes sense from their social engagements and the things that might interest them. One of the things that has thrived in our previous virtual program are some of the clubs and activities. Those things can be revived. And they're just precisely the things that can lift a spirit, especially for students who may be medically fragile, to have that social interaction that's non-academic and have that connectedness and that sense of belonging, which is really critically important. I think you bring up a really interesting point, which is maybe the lesson of today. And all of the things that the E&C committee has selected for discussion today really kind of fit into this one category, whether it's CREA or the blended learning program or EML or special education, or even how we serve schools through cross-functional teams or how we're going to serve schools. It's to the extent that we can personalize the experience for our students, and to the extent that we become more bespoke, is to the extent that we're going to be successful in getting the outcomes that we're looking for. It's when we overly generalize, when we overly average, when we go to the bigger picture, it's not successful. And Vice President Juando said there's 10 children represented on the dais. So does that mean a third, and a third in terms of resources? No, of course not, because you each have different children and different needs and different supports and different numbers of children. So we need to take that approach versus what we have been doing, which is to look at the world through averages. Just like what we look at through our programming and blended learning too. It's like, how do we create a more bespoke or personalized experience?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that that we also have to make sure that those kids, for some of them that might mean that what they need is not a one-on-one. What they need is a classroom experience. I had a scary moment earlier this week with one of my kids. There was like a nerve-wracking lump that was found, and we're getting mostly good news. It's all going to be good news tomorrow, which I'm not too concerned anymore. But it was interesting because in preparing for this session, I know I kind of foreshadowed that I wanted to talk more about this, about the online learning at our last session. I've been doing a lot of research, as I know all of you have as well. When I just had this flash of like, oh my gosh, what if my kid is going to be one of these kids who needs to be in this program? And it just totally broke my heart, as my heart has broken for other kids who are in the program now, because here I have this very social kid who's, loves learning. And a big part of that for her is she loves like helping other kids. She loves working. She loves the group work aspect of it.
Future teacher.
What's that?
Future teacher.
Just saying. I was a previous teacher. I'd be very proud of her. We're gonna try. But I'm just imagining her now having to log in, and maybe there's one other kid in the class. Maybe she doesn't even see their face. And she's totally capable academically, right? But she's going through a thing where she can't go in person to school, but she's wanting to learn all this. And then not only that, she's not getting a full day of interaction. She's getting, a quote unquote asynchronous, which is really amounting to homework assignments. It's just not a fit for most kids. Even really well done asynchronous is going to be a fit for far fewer kids than a synchronous experience. And so very limited hours, and I'm like, oh gosh, and the synchronous hours when they're there are going to maybe sometimes be outside of the regular school day, and that's when she would actually be able to see her friends who are getting out of school. And I'm just playing out in my mind all of these different, really feeling emotionally what I have been hearing now from parents who went through this type of transition. And we just should not have any parents and kids who are feeling like the option before them at MCPS is like an oh no, this is going to be really, really painful for my kid. And so this is an opportunity to move us into a place that we need to be. But part of that, I think a big part of that is you have to have the ability to have classrooms of kids. It's not just about having the menu of course offerings or even the menu of clubs, although I think that's a super important point and component that you raise. To be able to, when you think about an elementary school kid going into her in-school classroom, there's a reason that they go in and that's their home base. And they see that teacher and they see their friends and they have a morning meeting. Maybe they do some social emotional stuff. They're grounded for the day. We do that. We spend valuable class time during the course of a relatively small school day when we're thinking about all we're trying to do with these kids. And we dedicate that time to that when we're not teaching math, we're not teaching literacy, because we know that that's important to set them on the course for the day. And these kids need that. There are kids who maybe have one other student in their class and they want to have a play date with that one kid right now, and they don't know how to get in touch with that family. It's not good. And so I just want to make sure that that's a big part of the conversation. And I don't think you're going to get to the numbers. I know you're not going to get to the numbers that you need for classrooms of these kids, which would provide for an equitable learning environment for those kids who need it medically, that it's necessary. You're not going to get to the classroom size that they need and deserve if we don't expand the eligibility. Now, obviously we're not going to be able to, we don't have the funding to provide for everybody, right? But I think there has to be some expanding of eligibility, and then you let people lottery in to fill in some of those seats. There are other priorities here, obviously, our academic outcomes, right? And we've got a fiscal note that we have to be concerned about. Both of those can work with that plan. Both of those can work. So, academically, we saw that there were some, again, late breaking, but we've got them now, really positive outcomes that came out of the MBA, and they certainly don't show that you put every kid in that setting and they're going to have those outcomes, as we know, as parents from personal experience. It's just not the case. Most kids need to be in a brick and mortar school building. That's the setting where they're going to thrive best. But we also now know, and we have the data to show, not surprising because kids are a diverse bunch, that there are kids who are going to learn better with that virtual option. And so, for example, we saw from the MVA that their 2024 DIBELS assessments showed MVA students did dramatically outperform target scores. They also outperformed the DIBELS scores for Black and Hispanic students compared to MCPS broadly, which I think is super important, again, given our goals. We are always looking for tools. And so when we see a tool where we're seeing the DIBELS rates for Black and Hispanic students are moving up faster there than in another place, it doesn't, obviously, again, it doesn't mean all the students should be there, but it means for some students, and in this case, students whose families self-select them in because they're saying, for whatever reason, virtual learning is going to be a better option for our kids. We saw those parents were right. Those families were right. It was. And then to be clear, when we look at those scores, and there was math scores that showed similar things, about the population that we're talking about, there was a higher percentage of MBA students on farms assistance compared to within MCPS broadly. There were more than twice as many special education students and students with 504s within MVA compared to MCPS broadly. And so with that, we were still seeing these really excellent scores. So we have to use that data and be we've got to use that data. We're seeing an opportunity here. We're looking to make scores go up. This is a tool. We should not be limiting it arbitrarily. We should limit it fiscally because that's what we have to do for all of this. But that's where the limit should be. And right now, again, if we have a teacher who's teaching a class of 1 or 2 students, that does not make sense from a fiscal perspective. You can have another student who's zooming in to that classroom. And if they're going to do better, that is what we should be allowing. And that's going to help those 1 or 2 students who are there thrive as well. I'll also note that there was a higher percentage of students in the MVA compared to the MCPS more broadly population who are non-white as well. So it was really diverse in many different ways and still seeing a lot of success. We are constricted by many things and we are moving around a lot of things. We're going to be seeing, I think, some really dramatic improvements in a lot of ways within the brick and mortar buildings that we have in terms of social, emotional, academic, all kinds of things. But I think these two really, we have seen they don't need to be in competition. There is room from a fiscal perspective and from many other perspectives to have both, and that is going to make us an even more impressive school system. So I would just really urge you as you're looking into the next year, knowing we have to have this option, we must, because it's medically necessary for some kids, that a part of making it equitable and making it a fulsome experience is to have a classroom of multiple students, which means we're going to need to, I don't see how you do that without expanding eligibility. And I think, again, in terms of the fiscal perspective and the academic outcomes, that's something that we know how to do.
Thank you, Councilor Mink. Councilor Alvarez.
Thank you. I appreciate those very comprehensive comments by Councilmember Mink. I guess just 2 thoughts and then 2 questions. The first is, I, like all of us, was deeply moved by the families who came and testified before the council to talk about the loss for their family and their children. When we eliminated the virtual academy, they were also deeply concerned about how rapidly that decision was made and not having felt any opportunity to weigh in the process was equally as hurtful as the loss of the program itself. So Dr. Taylor, again, I'm giving you lots of kudos. I always try to because I think you're doing a great job. One of the first things you did when taking this position was meet with those families. That meant a lot to them. It meant a lot to this body. Appreciate that leadership. But to Councilmember Mink's point, we need to meet every student where they are, regardless of where they are. And sometimes that's a little bit more difficult in certain circumstances. So I do, once again, support this line item as well, because it makes sense for us to have a viable option for students that are in unique circumstances like the one you've described. But it also prepares us if, God forbid, we have to go back for whatever reason. There were a lot of lessons learned that we can't go back to before. But there may be circumstances that require us as a system to think about virtual learning for our students under certain circumstances. And what's happening at HHS right now scares the heck out of me. And so we just have to be thoughtful and mindful of that. So there are implications directly for the families who are served through this program, but I think it also helps with muscle memory and helps prepare the school system as a whole, if necessary, to take things to scale. So just wanted to make those comments. One question, though, is can you talk briefly about the criteria that will be used moving forward to provide this opportunity to students and what that looks like and how that may evolve moving forward?
At this time, I really can't because a lot of this is budget dependent.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be very selective about the time investment that we're making in terms of what we're focusing our energies on based on where the budget's going to land.
Mm-hmm.
And candidly, I don't want to do an entire programmatic workup for something if there aren't the funds to support it.
Gotcha. Appreciate that.
Give a sense of where it lands on your, priority list. You could almost say that about every item in the budget.
That's correct.
Just to be clear. So obviously it's something that the board requested, that you requested. You have ideas about it. Can you give a sense of where it lies in your priority list?
Absolutely. The budget summary, Table 1A, that we presented to the Board of Education, and the Board of Education made some adjustments and actually made some reductions before it's sent to the County Council for consideration, is our priority list. And it's broken up into a handful of categories. Non-discretionary expenditures, those are the things either by law, statute, or contract. We have some requirements tied to our performance, and I'll give you an example. It's not like we're not going to pay our electric bill. We're not going to not honor contracts that we've engaged in. The next section is our blueprint for Maryland's future, and then the last section is our discretionary funds. There's no legal requirement in state law that compels us to have a virtual or blended program. And so that is a discretionary expenditure, and the discretionary items are at the end of our list.
Right. So you've answered the question that it's at the bottom of the priority list in the way you structured it, in the sense that you want it to happen, but it's funding dependent.
Absolutely would not have made the cut if we didn't see it as an absolute necessity and something that was necessary for us to move forward to provide that bespoke education. But at the same time, I'm also cognizant of the fiscal realities that we're experiencing, and it's my job to communicate to the Board of Education, and our job as a governance team between the Board of Education and the superintendent to communicate to council what our priorities are, and this made the list because it is a priority.
I appreciate that. Yes, briefly, Councilmember May.
Just noting, I don't know what I would cut from the budget either at this point, and so I think it's incumbent upon all of us. You have provided the spreadsheet, and so if we're going to decide to not give MCPS the full request, I think we need to be transparent also about where we would make the cut. And I don't know the answer to that, because to me, cutting this line item is just not acceptable in the same way that cutting from the special education budget, et cetera. Because again, we are providing, we have a responsibility, we have a legal responsibility to provide an equitable education. What we have right now is, it is separate and unequal. Like, that's what I don't know how else to say it. We have kids who are only in this program because it is medically necessary for them to be in this program, as we all acknowledge, and we have provided them with a completely unacceptable experience. And I think it's important, I'm very positive that we're all acknowledging that, to be frank. It was not what anybody wanted, right? And you are asking and wanting the investment to change that. So, this is not, I'm not putting blame on it. This is just the reality. And so, it really hammers home that this is a bare bones budget, and I do think that whatever can be done, it's just got to be mandatory. This has got to be necessary to provide an equitable education, and so I'm just putting that out there for not just for you, but also for us on the council. Thanks.
Yeah, for the millions watching at home. That's right. before we move on here, we're landing the plane here. Don't worry. The need for individualized and differentiated instruction. Obviously, they're related but different. One related to individual student, other groups of students, and I know we do both. But I said this many times. You can't. It's almost impossible to do that, which is what we all say is the goal. We've all said it in different ways up here, and you've said it yourself. Unless you have the people and the resources to do it, you cannot do it. You can't do it in a class of 30 with kids with special ed and EML and low-income students. All these kids can learn, but it requires the resource to do it. You just can't do it. And I just need to, for the public, and we don't often give testimony back when we hear from people. We let them speak to us because it's not time efficient, and there's 11 of us and we like to talk, as you just saw from Councilmember Fake. And it was all great stuff, but I want to say back to people, like, you can't, you're not going to get the outcomes you want by, whether it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, whatever idiom you want to use. It's not going to work unless you provide the resources. And the resources in education have and will always be, and even when AI takes over, it will still be a sentient being that is people. In whatever form that connection takes, whether it's virtual, online, in groups, and if you want to differentiate and give a student what they need and give that human connection that we all need to live, it's going to take people. And and so I think we have to remember that, and we can't ask for individualized or differentiated instruction without people. We just can't do it. And this is an example of that. Let's move on to the next item. I think we have 2 more items.
So the next item is the cross-functional teams, and this is on page 9 of the packet. The cross-functional teams are a new concept in terms of providing more direct support and efficiently to schools. There's some new positions created, some changes in job titles and descriptions, and reductions in other positions. But because this is not a distinct line in the budget, the costs are found in a number of places, therefore not possible to zero in on a number in terms of the ask. There's commentary from MCPS on pages 9 and 10 in terms of how these teams will be assembled, how they will be structured and then implemented, how their work plans will move forward based on the individual needs of a school, working with those schools individually to be able to determine what their needs are, and then how these teams will interact with school leadership and staff. I think this is a key component of how the cross-functional teams will be successful, are these interactions. And then there is also a note at the end there in terms of which schools will be prioritized, on what basis. You can see there's 3 elements at the bottom there. So this is a change in terms of how MCPS is intending to provide support to schools. Therefore, I thought it would be interesting to the committee.
Yes, the often discussed and anticipated cross-functional teams. So if you want to give some context on how they're going to work, I will ask a couple questions just to get the juices flowing. Related, as one of the things we've heard, whether it is in the context of the ETCs we talked about earlier, or in the autism program, and there are other ways that people have expressed some concern about, well, how is this going to work? Am I going to lose my resources that I've had that are helping students in various ways? And if you could just address with some specific examples how you see these teams. Obviously, you don't think that will happen because you wouldn't have proposed it, but how you see them working and addressing some of the maybe concerns that have been raised. Does that make sense?
Before I kick things off to my much better looking colleagues down the table here.
I was hoping they'd get involved here.
I do want, because thanks for coming, for just hanging out. It's one thing to just sit there and look pretty, you got to work here for today. And that's really why they're here, is to talk about this topic, but I'll add a couple of things. New to MCPS, not new. This is not a new concept or a new idea. This is something that a lot of other large school districts and large organizations in general try to leverage. And it really represents a couple of fundamental philosophical shifts. The first fundamental and philosophical shift is, where do central service or central office employees belong in terms of doing their work? And the philosophical shift is that I believe that they primarily need to be in the field, in the schools, providing direct support. That's the first philosophical shift. And so that doesn't mean that our central services employees were all at central office all the time in the past. That's not the case. As a matter of fact, they're routinely in schools. But having a strategy assigned to their school placement and to their school assignment and to the role that they have is different. And to having continuity behind that direction is different. Having purpose behind that direction is different. The second philosophical shift is deciding what is most important, not deciding what's important, because the list of things that's important is a very, very long list. Deciding what is most important and being laser focused on how we might address those critical areas. And I'd say if there's a third one, it's to tap into what we've already discussed today, which is, how do we meet the specific needs of a specific group or a specific target audience of students and schools? What I can tell you is that I have learned something new coming to MCPS. I have always favored a level-alike system in terms of how I've served schools in other districts, that when grouped together, elementary schools seem to thrive, middle schools seem to thrive, high schools seem to thrive, and yes, there's a lot of benefits that come from that. But I have seen the wisdom in the cluster model and the cluster approach that MCPS takes to servicing the needs of carved out communities within our district. And so to that extent, to the sense that we can shrink the district for those communities, target resources to specific areas that have specific functional targets, and I'll outline what those are, is really the genesis behind this. Right now, a central services employee might have a caseload of 40 schools. And the probability of them visiting all of those 40 schools on a regular basis is 0. But if their focus caseload of schools is 9 or 12 or 15, the probability of them having regular interactions with those school communities, knowing the teachers by name, knowing the principals by name, knowing the school staff by name, and being able to provide direct support and embedded job coaching, I like our odds. So this is really not just about cross-functional teams, but really about central office reorganization, and the cross-functional teams just happen to be the centerpiece of that reorganization. And how we might take our existing resources and reallocate them differently to deploy them into a school environment. So with that, I've talked enough for this morning, and our fabulous team of our Chief of Staff, S.E. McGuire, our Chief of School Leadership, Peter Moran, and our Chief Academic Officer, Nikki Hazel. I'd love for them to share some thoughts and answer some questions on behalf of the district.
And let's combine these last two topics, which you've already done, which is the office restructuring, how it relates to cross-functional teams, so we can wrap that up together.
Well, and on that note, exactly, I want to build on what Dr. Taylor was saying there. The purpose of the restructuring and reorganization of central services really is summed up in some ways around the philosophy of the cross-functional teams as well as the structure of the cross-functional teams. The level of movement that that you're seeing and that our colleagues and teammates are experiencing in central office is in service of really having central office be as front-facing as possible, as school-facing as possible, and bringing those resources that schools and communities are used to directly into the school environment. And so, as you said, Mr. Jawando, this is not so much that folks are losing a central office resource, but that the central office resource will be more present and more available to them. And so the position changes that we see in the central office reorganization, again, a number of them are direct realignments to the cross-functional teams. Others are central office realignments to support the functions of the cross-functional teams, and also will help us at central office achieve that integrated and cross-functional office relationships, get us out of what can become natural silos, and really deeper embed that cross-functional collaboration across central offices and the folks that we are able to have, again, directly facing and supporting the schools. So that ties both of those items together.
Appreciate that. Anything to add?
I would just add that we've talked many times in the past few years about the equal distribution of resources and the equitable distribution of resources. The cross-functional teams are a mechanism to provide equitable distribution of resources to schools. One example, just on an organizational level, is that we're going to have 3 standalone clusters that will have their own cross-functional team, and it will only be between 8 and 9 schools. Kennedy, Watkins Mill, and Gaithersburg. Okay. So those schools and those clusters will have increased access and consistent support from experts in the field. And I think the other component, and Dr. Taylor talked about having 40 schools. When you have 40 schools, you don't have the relationships or the trust for people to want to receive the supports that they need from you. You also don't have the contextual understanding of what is happening in that school or in that community. So by shrinking things down, like I don't have to go into a school and go through this continual assessment of what's needed. I have relationships with people that they're coming to me. I'm modeling things. So one of the ways that I've talked with our teams about this is to not look at yourself as a central services instructional specialist, but look at yourself as a school-based instructional specialist who will model teaching practices in classrooms side by side with teachers and have a very clear understanding of what the experience is of not only the teacher but the students on the ground, so that we're providing relevant and meaningful supports every day.
Yes,
I think I would just highlight 2 other aspects of our expectations for the team members. We were very deliberate in the job descriptions to emphasize that 80% of the time is in schools. Of course, they will need some home-based time to work both together as a cross-functional team and with their home office, if you will, of their subject matter expert office. And we're being very deliberate in setting up systems and processes around those team coming together times as well, to be sure we're communicating again with a level of consistency. But the expectation clearly is that folks are in schools. I think the other piece that we wanted to be very clear about is actually, I apologize, it left my head, so I will just leave it at that place then.
No problem. So just to the basics, and then I'll turn to colleagues. 84 central office FTEs being reallocated. That's where you get the $8.1 million movement from central office into schools. It'll have a senior director of school leadership as a team lead. For how many teams do you expect to have total?
13.
13, okay. And everyone will have a learning specialist, literacy specialist, math, EML, special education, a staff person, a cluster security coordinator, and a PPW, or PPWs.
So if you think about the things that we've talked about today and the pressing issues facing the district, safety and security, special education, EML, literacy, mathematics. Those are the things that we've identified as being most important. Not the exhaustive list of the things that are important, but the things that are most important, where we need to focus our attention and our energy. And so that's what comprises the team this year.
This year could change depending on how things go. Likely will change.
We should be fixing some things, so right. Yes, it should change.
And then there'll be cluster aligned based on our current clusters. You mentioned 3 clusters will have a dedicated team, right? And then the others, I guess, would just be the other third. So there's 24 26 clusters now? Or
26. So we've shrunken down the caseload for these teams from between 8 schools and 19 schools. Okay. So the highest you'd have is 19, and we strategically grouped clusters together so that those with an intensive need. We tried to keep things regional so that you have access and can get there quickly, but also just matching one that has intense needs with one that might not have as intensive needs, so that you can differentiate your resources more appropriately.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, again, it's something the board has signed off. This is something you want to implement as superintendent. I think it makes a ton of sense conceptually. Obviously, there's always bumps in the road when you roll something out, so I think it'll be important for the board and us as the E&C committee to come back and get a status update on like how you think how you think this is going, what the metrics are that you're using to determine success.
Can we talk about that briefly?
Sure.
There are clear metrics for each member of each cross-functional team, and they are largely tied to student performance. So as the schools in your cluster perform well, that is a reflection of your cross-functional team's performance. So we are tying central services performance to school performance directly.
That's great. I don't think you have any disagreement from anyone up here on that. All right, I'll turn to my colleagues, Councilmember Albanaz, and then Councilmember Mee.
Thanks. So I'm a bit of a reorg geek. We did 5 of them while I was at the Department of Recreation, not because we wanted to, but mostly because of the reductions that we had to make at the time of personnel. We just had to be more nimble. So I appreciate and respect what you're doing here. I just wanted to give you we talked about this privately, Dr. Shail. I want to give you an opportunity to uplift this publicly. You sought feedback directly from school administrators, and that also helped inform the development of this structure as well. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thank you. I am not a reorganization geek. As a matter of fact, I cannot stand them. I tend to think that, well, first things first, it's an emotional experience.
It is.
You're talking about people's lives, their careers, their commitment to the school system. It's not something that should be entered into lightly. There really needs to be intentionality and structures that are put in place to preserve what you're really trying to accomplish. And I think that there's 2 things that really need to drive any kind of reorganization effort. One is your values as a district, making sure that we're holding true to our values. And the second is making sure that we have clear goals of what we want to accomplish. And our clear goals are really simple: to improve performance in the district, to increase some operational efficiency through better system structures and processes, and to make sure that our schools are receiving a level of support and care that is reflective of our values. Well, candidly, they haven't been. And when we have a central service that's as large as our central services are, we have to ask some really hard questions of where are the pain points in terms of their service delivery and the things that are most important to them. And are we viewing things through the lens of their user experience? Well, I'm going to tell you that we historically as a district have not been great about that, because we have been viewing things through the lens of what is quote unquote good for MCPS as the entity, not what the school's experiences or the teacher's experiences or the student's experiences. And so this is a bit of a shift in philosophy and a bit of a shift in our approach in terms of putting the value back on what's happening in the schoolhouse versus what's happening at the central office.
That makes sense. And yeah, just to elaborate on what I said earlier, it was the circumstances that absolutely required reorganization, which is what we see here before us today, which is what I experienced. And you're right, it is challenging, it is emotional, and I know you don't want to do it more than any times that you have to. I guess just 2 final questions or thoughts / questions. One of the things that, it's a very large system. People move in and out of positions, they have new titles, but it's still a relationship business. It's, you establish relationship with people, you develop trust, you have navigators within this really complex system, within the schools, and then they change. And then you got to start all over again. And that's true of outside providers and stakeholders as well. So can you talk, or anybody on the team, can you talk about, from your perspective, why you think this will help maintain a better level of consistency moving forward, so that you are, people retire, life happens, but to the degree to which we can keep people in positions longer, it will help the system as a whole.
So I would go back to, so Dr. Taylor has had us, go through the socialization process of cross-functional teams, seek feedback from principals. There's no one more excited about cross-functional teams than the principal. And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Because the principal should only have to make one phone call.
Mm-hmm.
They shouldn't have to try to navigate this complex system of trying to search out and find the right person to help them, help the teacher, help the child, help the family. It should just be a one-to-one. And so we've created an organizational structure now where they know exactly who that person is across all these different fields, special education, whether it's compliance or instruction, EML support, elementary literacy, math support. They have that one-to-one connection. So the social accountability structure that's embedded when you are not only accountable to a team of people, but you know exactly who the person is that you're reporting to and the quality of service that you're delivering. I think that makes a significant difference. And I think we are right now being very intentional around the relationship process and developing the teams to ensure that there's a match, whether it's pre-existing relationships that they've had with people that they've worked with and demonstrated success, whether it's familiarity of working as a former teacher or leader in a specific cluster, whether it's the impact that you've had in let's say if you're going in the Gaithersburg cluster and it's you've made significant gains supporting emergent multilingual learners. We're really making those investments to ensure that people are not only in the right place, but then onboarding them to develop very meaningful relationships and go through the team building process. I'm not a big believer, and in the idea of an icebreaker creates a team. But I'll tell you what creates a great team is doing work together, and we're going to do great work together. Starting before July 1, we have a nice long runway since we've been able to plan this out for several months. So very excited, and it's a very relationship-centric structure that I think will really create great results for children.
I think it makes a heck of a lot of sense. I'll just make one more observation. It's very similar to the Kennedy cluster concept that Dr. Wiest began to implement before the recession hit in 2009. So, and by extension and potentially the evolution of this, once it's, implemented with fidelity and you've got a track record, and is expanding this concept to include outside stakeholders for support for the entire family. So then these clusters don't just include MCPS staff, but then by extension, the nonprofits that are in these schools serving these children, or the other key stakeholders who are in the community, the sports associations. Everybody's got a role to play, and it just helps better strategically align and manage all of that, which can be a little overwhelming. So I think it's exciting. I think this is long overdue. Wholeheartedly support it, and I appreciate the very thoughtful approach that you've taken to making this recommendation.
Thank you. Councilmember Mink.
Thanks. I wanted to touch on a couple aspects, parts of the MCPS infrastructure that you have folded in to the cross-functional teams, where there have been some community confusion and some concerns about what that's going to look like, and wanting to make sure that they can understand that it's going to be a gain and not a loss. And so that's in terms of restorative justice and in terms of the equity work. So we now have each of the cross-functional teams a professional learning specialist, which I understand that's really going to be their focus, is restorative justice work and equity work, and that is so needed. and I'm glad to see that's a priority. I wanted to give you the opportunity to speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, so a big change for us is, does central office serve the function of swooping in to solve a problem, or are we a participant in helping people to solve their own problems? The analogy that I used in describing this with our Board of Education was, are we the ones that do the fishing, or are we teaching others to fish? Well, as a learning organization, we should be in the teaching people to fish business, not in the fishing business. And so this is a pretty substantive shift for us. And I would say that is one of the focus of the professional learning specialist is to focus on restorative justice. Another focus is on broad-based equity training. Another focus might be on Tier 1 instructional strategies. But absolutely critical, we actually put it in the job description that persons qualified for that position needed to have a background and training in restorative justice, because we see it as a high yield approach that when shared broadly can be really effective. And I will say that for as much of a commitment as we've made to restorative justice, we haven't seen much of the needle move. And part of the rationale behind that is because of our strategy. When you have one person or two people or three people trained in restorative justice in a school setting, it's not comprehensive enough to have the kind of dent that you want to make in terms of making that strategy pervasive in the school as an actual tool in the toolkit for the school to use to solving difficult situations. So part of the role of this individual would be, as part of their mandate, is to help move the needle in schools to make it a part of the school's culture and climate. And in many schools it is, but in many schools it's not. And so it was important for us that we shift the focus from our restorative justice personnel being part trainer, part superhero with a red cape, to being full-time trainer and less superhero with the red cape.
Great. And then you've also noted that that the 8 restorative justice specialists and the 3 equity instructional / equity training specialists whose positions were eliminated, that the intention, obviously budget, et cetera, but the intention is to place them into those professional learning specialist roles, given that, as you said, is that still,
that's
still the plan?
Working out.
Okay, great. And obviously there's HR, blah, blah, blah. Leave that to you all. But that's great to hear, because as you said, the importance of them coming in with that background is really essential if we are actually going to be standing behind that this is what they're going to be doing. And then to clarify, the Tier 1 instruction is part of the job description because equity and RJ are relevant in Tier 1 instruction. Is that
Absolutely.
That's accurate? Great. I just want to make sure that we are, again, that we're not losing any of that. We have RJ positions and equity positions who were full-time dedicated, and I just want to make sure that we're not losing any of that.
Yeah, so again, you bring up something that's really important, and I think it's important for people to know and understand, is that we have really talented people on our team. And we have really talented people that can still perform a great service to the district. Although our strategy is shifting, that doesn't diminish how talented our teammates are and how we can better leverage them in a different space, doing something a little bit different or slightly different than what they were doing before, or doing this plus something else, or doing something a little bit different. It does provide us an opportunity to retain great people, but also to shift our strategy at the same time. And that really was our objective. And because we do have great folks and how we deploy them a little bit differently, we are changing their mandate, we are changing their focus, and we are providing a different set of directions.
When you say change their, and agree with all of that, and we all know that, as noted, reorg is part of what's happening, but making sure that we have the restorative justice rollout that we need and the equity improvements that we need, that is still their mandate, right? And the core to their function here. It's just being accomplished in a different.
So much so it's literally written into the job description. But I think it's important too to articulate our shift in strategy,
right?
Because I think that is fundamental to this, is our expectation, and this is one of the key tenets to restorative justice. I'm a huge proponent of restorative justice work, is that it's predicated on a prior relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Having outside personnel drive restorative circles is not productive because there is not a prior relationship. Shifting the strategy to having school personnel develop this skill set leverages that prior relationship. And I
Mhm.
think we're going to get better results as a consequence.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I know we've had this conversation, so I know where your head's at. I'm asking because I know that these are the questions that I'm hearing from the public, and I want to make sure that they have the same clarity that you have given me on this. And so when we come back and circle back on some of the details of what this rollout looks like, that they want to know how are the aspects of RJ that we're working, how are they still working? How are they working better? They're not being dropped. They're going to hear those things. And another piece of this that where I think that there's a great opportunity to see that increase in performance in terms of the goal and what we're looking to do. The equity unit, which there still is an intention to be an equity unit, but we've got people from there who are going to be placed now onto these teams within these spaces. One of the issues that they had previously was, as was noted, important to making positive changes in a school is having the relationship, right? And having somebody who's going to be there regularly, working with the administration in partnership. The equity unit, did not have, when they came in to do their equity audits, there just was not a framework for that. And some could say they had no teeth for getting a school to make changes. We could also say that there wasn't a framework for providing, the expectations, the accountability, and really importantly, the support that you need for that to really be a partnership process there. And so by having members of the equity unit where that's their focus and their expertise, and everybody knows that what these teams are doing is going around and helping schools with the things that they need in the areas of, finding areas of opportunity to make improvements, that is the role, that framework is going to be there. I do think that there's a real opportunity there. And I wanted to double check, and again, this is something that we've talked about, but wanted to give you a chance to voice this, that there is going to be collaboration between those folks and the equity unit, who we understand they're going to be kind of designing the equity anti-racism strategy moving forward, system-wide training and support, all those sorts of things. Obviously, it makes a lot of sense for them to be having time and space and some kind of way of making sure that during that 20%, right, that there's opportunities for them to touch base with these PLS folks to make sure that the system-wide plans are aligning with what's being rolled out on the ground. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. And I'll even add one more dimension to this. A major pain point that I've observed is it makes it very hard to move the needle in terms of some of the equity work that we would like to see accomplished when you have to be invited to a school. The schools that are inviting you are already further ahead in that equity work.
Mm-hmm.
The schools that need the help are not necessarily the ones that are first in line to invite somebody to have additional support. Part of this framework is that invitation is now a mandate and a requirement, not something that can be passively done. So much of this is shifting from a passive arrangement to the equity work to an active arrangement of the equity work. We are not abandoning our approach to equity. We will still have a central-based equity unit that will still perform a lot of the functions that our equity unit is currently doing right now, but we will be deploying many of those folks into the field on the cross-functional teams as a result as well. And I think that that's another prerequisite that has made part of this so exciting and so fun, is that these are shared values and shared beliefs on these teams, that this is the work that they want to see get done, and that they are moving from a passive state to an active state.
That's great. Love that framing. Look forward to coming back and having the more fulsome conversation about the programmatic details, and noting that, there are families who have been burned by promises made and promises not kept, and by, us not really being up to the standards that we need to be in doing this exact type of work, in establishing a culture of restorative justice, in really approaching equity in a proactive way that's going to create meaningful change. And some of that has hit the news and some of it has not, but there's been a lot of pain, and there is a lot of concern and distrust about whether there's going to be a gap between what we say and what we do. And I know that that's the space that you are coming into, and you're working hard. All of you here on our board is working hard, not just in this area, but in many areas to overcome that. This is a big one where we have to earn the trust of folks back. And so I appreciate everything you just said, and to circling back on what the programmatic details look like. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Mink. Yeah, we will certainly continue. We've had sessions on restorative justice and equity unit. We will do those once we get through budget to get those, see how this stuff is working. Obviously, there's still a ton of work to do around implementation of the anti-racist audit, and we've talked about that earlier in the year. And obviously, that the teams and the equity unit are going to need to be focused on that. I always like to give a shout out to Julius West to lift up your point where restorative justice is working, and they've seen they were part of our panel when we talked about it. To your point, it's because it's more embedded in and relied upon by everyone in the building. So to the extent that we can filter that down and the cross-functional teams can be a part of helping to do that, that's going to be a good thing. I think we're done with the items we need to cover. I just wanted to mention we got a memo yesterday from the county executive. One of the changing his approach, he intends to notifying us that he's sending some budget amendments that directly impact MCPS. So I wanted to mention it today. There is obviously a 3.5% property tax increase included specifically for education. That with the income tax offset credit would have given additional $56 million to fund the MCPS budget. That he's suggesting that that's no longer needed. As you remember, there were a lot of other puts and takes at the state level. We didn't know how much pension liability we were going to get, all the other things. So thankfully, things worked out for us in this context. I think it's a good thing in probably the best scenario that it could have, given what we were looking at. So he's instead recommended an increase of the income tax by 0.01 to 3.3, which would allow us to fund the MCPS budget and other items in his budget. Obviously, there are going to be puts and takes across all the committees. That's happening right now. But I think this is good news. I was not excited about having to potentially raise property taxes on folks. It's a very regressive flat tax that hits people not in a great way. If you're a senior in your home that isn't working, it hits you just as much as someone who is working, whereas income tax is a little different. So we're going to debate all that and go through all that, but I wanted to make sure, as I know you all probably are aware, that that's impacting, it will impact this committee's decision, I think, and the level of funding recommendation we send to the full council. So thank you. This was a really good discussion today. We will see you all again Friday later this week to have our third session. And that one is in the morning at I think we're starting at 9 a.m. just to make sure the public is clear. We've adjusted that up a little bit. So look forward to seeing you there, and thank you. And Ms. Hazel, I know you didn't get to say anything, but good to see you as always. Yeah.
Thank you. Good to see you. I'm sure I'll have much to say.
Yeah, we're going to put you on the spot on Friday.
Okay.
All right, with that, we are adjourned.